Okay, welcome everyone to the September 18th, 2024 Environmental Quality Commission meeting. This is an in-person and virtual meeting with Environmental Quality Commission members, city staff, and members of the public. Let's get rolling, and we can start with introducing staff and EQC members who are present. In the room, we have myself, Chair Schmidt, Vice Chair McKenna, Commissioners Headley, LaRocca, Hill, Kissel-Meyer, and Plager-Yopair. Staff present includes Sustainability Manager Rachel Launder and Management Analyst 2, Liz Tapia. Ms. Launder, would you please provide instructions to the Commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Chair Schmidt. Welcome. Thank you all for coming tonight. If you are in person, there are public comment cards on that ledge over there, and we'll make public comment for each item. If you're attending virtually, you can also provide public comment by hitting that raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen or next to your name if you're on your device. And I will be able to unmute your microphone, and you will be able to provide public comment for up to 3 minutes tonight. If you're on a landline, you can push *9 on your phone so we can unmute you. That's all for now. I'll return the meeting to you, Chair.
All right, fantastic. So we'll move on to section C of the agenda, public comment. Under public comment, the public may address the commission on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. While you're not required to provide your name or city residence, it is helpful. The commission cannot act on items that are not listed on the agenda, and therefore the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Sustainability Manager Launder, please call for public comment.
Sure. If you're in the room, we have public comment cards on that ledge. You can hand them back to me. If you're joining online, you can hit the raise hand button and we can unmute you. And if you're calling in from a landline, you can press *9. I'm checking online. I don't see any hands raised. We don't have any by phone or in the room, so we can return the meeting.
Fantastic. So we will move on to section D, regular business, and we'll start with D1, approval of the July 21st, 2024 Environmental Quality Commission meeting minutes.
That should be August.
Or August, sorry, yes.
Yeah, that's bad. It would have been August 21st.
August 21st. So any clarifying questions from the EQC on the August minutes before we take public comment? No, seeing none. Ms. Launder, do we have any public comment on this item?
Sure, we have the public comment cards over there. If you'd like to make a comment in the room, you can hit raise hand button on Zoom or *9 if you're calling in from a landline. I don't see any public comment in the room, online or by phone, so I return the meeting to you.
Fantastic. So we'll open it up for EQC discussion and or a motion on the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes. Second.
Great. Go ahead, please.
We have a motion by Hill and a second by Kissel to approve the August 21st, 2024 Environmental Quality Commission meeting minutes. All in favor?
Yep.
Perfect. It passes unanimously. Okay.
Fantastic. So we will move on to agenda item D2, a presentation from the Institute for Market Transformation on Building Performance Standards. For this agenda item, we have one guest speaker, James Burton, who is the Senior Policy Associate from the Institute for Market Transformation. The presentation will cover policy options for achieving Cap 1 in existing high-rise multifamily and large commercial buildings classified as 25,000 square feet and above. So James, thanks for joining us, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Let me just take a second to share my screen. Okay, are you seeing the presenter slides or are you seeing just the slides themselves?
Yep.
We're seeing the presenter version, it looks like, with the preview to the next slide.
Just give me a second, I need to. Okay, that better?
I think it's taking a second to load. There we go. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, my name is James Burton, and as the introduction said, I'm Senior Policy Associate here at the Institute for Market Transformation. We're a national nonprofit based in DC, but we have staff all across the US. I will flag that it is currently 9 o'clock in New York, where I am based. So if this is anything less than my usual stellar performance, I apologize. But let's crack on. So, a building performance standard. Why would this be something that Menlo Park or any government should consider? They are the most efficient and effective way we have in terms of driving decarbonization in existing buildings. Existing buildings are here to stay for a long time, and buildings are the second biggest contributor to emissions across the US, second only to transportation. And cities have been regulating buildings for a long time through a variety of methods. So they've been doing that through codes initiatives, they've been doing that through permits, and those different types of levers there require a trigger. And so a trigger and then action, and they're very transactional. BPS is a different way of doing this. So it basically puts into perspective the future that leaders would want in terms of city legislatures, and lets them look at what climate targets they want to get to, set those climate targets for existing buildings, and then the buildings in a timeline that makes sense to them reach those targets over time. And they can be applied broadly to lots of large buildings, and we'll get in more into the details later on, but they send a long-term signal for the existing building stock that government is committed to making sure that its buildings are efficient, and also sends a long-term signal as well to building owners that make these changes that they are committed to this, they're committed to resilient buildings. And so it's a good long-term signal to send in terms of both the government side of things and in terms of building owners making these investments. So in terms of impacts, and like I said, we're going to get more into specifically what a building performance standard is in a second, but in terms of impacts, there's some pretty impressive numbers that you can see up there. So Washington, DC has the earliest adopted building performance standard. Their first compliance cycle is starting this year. So they are the first government across the whole US that is actually reaching a compliance cycle where buildings have to meet targets. They're just hitting that first cycle this year. But yes, that says that, like it says there, they expect to reduce their energy use in buildings by about 20%. And there's some other figures here from New York in terms of green jobs that we could expect to come from a building performance standard, and also some other emission savings there as well. So a building performance standard is essentially a way of setting performance targets. So these can be in terms of energy efficiency, these can be in terms of greenhouse gas intensity, of setting targets that get more stringent over time. So building owners will be given their target, they will have a period of time to meet that target, and then the target will reduce again in number. And so it makes it so that, if we have a goal of net zero across the building stock by 2050, that would be the final target, and we would have targets in between that the building owners would need to comply with. And it's been used across a whole bunch of different public and private buildings. So commercial space is often covered by building performance standards, as well as multifamily properties. But generally, these are focused on buildings 25,000 square feet and over. I think we've yet to see a building performance standard that is trying to address buildings under 20,000 square feet. 25,000 is about the mark that we've hit there. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. One of the simplest reason is basically building owners that own larger buildings, for the most part, are more wealthy. And so they have more ready access to capital to make the investments and improvements that they need to meet these compliance targets. And when we start going to under 20,000 square feet, we come into smaller businesses, smaller building owners. They don't have that same access to capital. And finally, they complement building codes. So a building performance standard helps address all of the existing buildings. Your building code is also, from the other end, making sure that all of the new buildings are efficient. And so like we said, if there's a goal of net zero by 2050 or something like that, attacking from both sides is the best way to do this. So a BPS is different from lots of different policies in that it does a whole bunch of different things. So it drives broad improvement across a lot of different types of existing buildings, and it often can tackle most types of buildings. So we have in Boston aquariums covered by building performance standard. There's higher education buildings covered by the building performance standard. Affordable multifamily housing. Those are all covered. They have different targets. They have different ways that they can reach those targets, but they're all covered by it because they meet that minimum size standard. There's balance flexibility here in terms of recognizing the need for owners to make the changes in their buildings and make the improvements in their buildings in the timeline that makes sense for their building. So there will be a graphic later on where I'll show a building reaching its targets over time. What we want to make sure that we do with a BPS is make sure that we are not telling the building owners what changes they need to make and when. Every building is unique, and so we want to make sure that in terms of the financial capacity of the building owner, but also in terms of things like the end of system life for their boiler or something, we want to make sure that they are making those changes and switching those systems out. If it's a fossil fuel system, switching out to a more efficient electrical system. We want to make sure that they're doing that at times that make sense for them. So we don't want a prescriptive building performance standard where we might say to building owners, every building owner needs to change their boiler to be a heat pump electrical boiler in the next 5 years, because for lots and lots of buildings, that might not make sense. They might have just switched out to a new gas heat pump a couple of years ago. Obviously, that's not ideal, but we don't want to have building owners make those changes in a timeline that doesn't make sense for them. And there's a couple of different other things in there in terms of flexibility. It requires immediate action. And like we said earlier on, it sends a long-term signal in terms of the government's commitment to making investments in climate protection and reducing emissions, and also for commercial building owners and multifamily building owners. It's sending a long-term signal that they are wanting to make sure their buildings are resilient and that they have low operating costs. This is a map showing all of the different types of building performance policies there are across the US. So these are policies that are specifically tackling large buildings. And so we have a graphic here showing that there's benchmarking happening across the US. And you'll see that a lot of cities have adopted these, but also states have adopted these policies as well. And this is on our website if people are interested in looking at this further. But in terms of what this means for California, we want to think about the fact that California has a benchmarking law at the moment. I've got some slides later on we're going to talk about. They are looking to adopt a statewide BPS. And so we need to think about what things we can do to make sure that BPS is a success in California and is a success in the cities and the buildings that it will touch. So California in this graphic is orange because of AB 802, which is the benchmarking bill for California. So buildings over 50,000 square feet have to benchmark, and that covers both commercial buildings and multifamily buildings. These are the governments that have committed to passing building performance standards under the White House's National BPS Coalition. So this was set up by the Biden administration and is an effort for all of these governments to pass and design and then pass, equitable building performance standards. And again, you can see there's states in here. We have I think 2 counties in there actually in Maryland. And then there are cities as well. And these are all in different places. Some of them you will see the green have passed BPS. Some of them are just in a development stage. And in terms of the support that IMT brings to this, we support with the policy language around this. So we staff the National BPS Coalition on behalf of the White House. So we help a lot with the policy language, and we help a lot with the rulemaking, and we also help with stakeholder engagement. So making sure that frontline communities, those that are hit first and worst by the effects of climate change, making sure that they're involved in this, making sure that they have a voice in terms of how fines might be levied against building owners, but also making sure that we're engaging with building owners who will have to make improvements as part of a BPS. So the principles that we want to have central in a BPS design, we want to think about the end goals that we have around climate change. And so we want to think about what goals does Menlo Park have? What goals does the state of California have? And what can we do in terms of designing a building performance standard to reach those goals? We also need to be aware of the history of systemic racism in terms of where affordable housing is located in cities, the quality of that affordable housing, and make sure that, like I said, we are engaging with the people who are going to be hit first and worst by the effects of climate change, and also maybe don't have the same amount of finances on hand to pay for their energy bills. And so if we have a building performance standard that is potentially going to push people's electric bills up, we need to look at that and ask questions around, is this the best thing for us to do? Could we readdress this and redesign this to make sure that people who are already struggling are not going to be made to struggle further? Jobs and economic growth are often a really big part of this as well, in terms of creating sustainable jobs that are going to last a long time. Like we said earlier, there was about nearly 120,000 jobs for New York City coming out from their building performance standard. And so these jobs existing in the space of sustainability, energy efficiency, electrification, they're going to be around for a long time. It is not the same as a job working in oil or gas, where we have to stop using those fossil fuels eventually. And so if you are working in that space, there may come a time where you lose your job. Whereas if you're working in the energy efficiency space, because that is the way we all need to go, you can guarantee that your job's going to be around for a lot longer. In terms of certainty, like I've said, we want to make sure that building owners know their end target and know any interim targets across the timeline of a building performance standard, so they know what to do. And in terms of transparency, we want to make sure that building owners are seeing what the targets are and what the performance are of buildings that look like theirs. So on that earlier slide with the map of the US, there's benchmarking and transparency laws. And so the transparency part would mean that I, as a building owner of a multifamily building that's 50,000 square feet, I can expect my building's performance to be put publicly on a dashboard. People can see it, my tenants can see it. And so commercial tenants might ask me, why is our building operating 20% less efficiently than this building that looks exactly like it and operates exactly like it? That makes it so that the transparency is a key thing here. It puts pressure on bad actors and rewards good actors. And like it says below, it drives early action. So you are encouraged as a building owner to start making improvements early on. The more improvements and small improvements you make, those quickly build up savings that can make it easier to then sink more capital into more expensive upgrades. So for example, we might suggest a building owner focus on things like making sure that all of their lighting is with LEDs, making sure that their lights operate on a schedule that makes sense, or maybe they are based on occupancy, and so the light turns off when it senses no one is in the room. Those changes can make maximum 10% efficiency improvements, but normally around 2 or 3%. So reducing your electricity use by that amount per year helps you save money, helps you build into the next, like I said, potentially more expensive improvement that you would like to make. Number 8 is a super important one in terms of making sure that it accommodates building life cycle events. So like I said earlier, we don't want to have a policy where we are forcing building owners to make changes that don't make sense on their timeline. They might have just upgraded to a new gas system the year before the BPS was passed. And so making them switch over to an electric system before that system has aged out and is too old, it doesn't make sense. That's not fair, and there will be pushback. They're also simple. It's clear, there's the target. You as the building owner can decide how to hit it in the way that makes sense for your building. So there's ease in the compliance and implementation. So Senate Bill 48, which is the bill in California that is most related to this work, It requires the use of the benchmarking data from AB 802 that Laura referenced earlier to decarbonize large existing buildings. So it's not explicitly calling for BPS as part of that strategy, but the Energy Commission have already said that they're gonna focus on BPS as part of this. And one thing that's great about this, the same as they did with AB 802, CEC have suggested that they're not going to preempt strong local building performance standards. So there is scope here for cities that want to develop and design and implement their own building performance standards that potentially touch buildings of a smaller square footage than the one at the state level, which at the moment it says 50,000 square feet. It could be developed to go lower, but it says 50,000 square feet. Local governments do have the power to go beyond that. They could be more aggressive with their timelines. And we're getting the sense from CEC that they don't want to preempt that. They want to encourage local governments that want to be more aggressive about this, that they can do so. And so strategic actions for a just economy, they played a really important role in terms of the Senate Bill 48 collaboration part of this. So IMT was a co-sponsor of this, of Senate Bill 48. We have a model law that I've got the next slide on actually. Our model law helped craft and was a basis for a lot of what was in Senate Bill 48. But SAGE have played a really key role in making sure that community-based organizations are involved in this. So there is the strategy report that is due to be published by June 2026 by CEC. They have to, as part of that, legally they're required to speak to tenant advocacy groups, speak to groups that have environmental justice concerns, and SAGE was a really crucial part of that. So we thank them for that. We think that's really important. And like I said, we want to make sure that people that are poor, are struggling, have health concerns due to systemic racism and other redlining issues. We want to make sure that their voices are heard in the Senate Bill 48 process. And like I said, we have a model law. We actually have two model BPS laws now. So we have one that is longer, that has lots and lots of details. It's about 30 pages. It's exhausting to read. That is for governments that want all of the details, or as many of the details as possible in the building performance standard, getting passed in the legislative portion, and then leaving less of the details to the rulemaking stage, where the department that would implement a BPS would make more decisions. We have a short building performance standard law, which is less than half the size, which states often like they want something simpler. It's easier to get it through the legislative process, and then they can flesh the details out further down the line. But our building performance standard, or model building performance standard, we reviewed work by expert stakeholders. So it says they're in government, real estate. We spoke to everyone and anyone about this, and it's the first and still only model BPS laws out there. So in terms of how our model law addresses building performance and decarbonization, there's a couple of different ways we can think about it. So the standards are based on performance metrics, and so they address different things and can be sensitive to what a specific government might want to focus on. So site energy use intensity, for example. If a government had a building stock that it wanted to become much more efficient, that would be the performance metric that we would recommend. So that drives energy efficiency improvements. It does drive electrification as well as part of that, because electric equipment is 3 or 4 times more efficient than fossil fuel alternatives. But it focuses on the energy efficiency part first, and then often electrification comes after that. We could also instead look at on-site or district thermal greenhouse gas emissions, and that would then drive electrification further and more rapidly. And we've seen a couple of places, so Vancouver, for example, they adopted both of those performance metrics. So buildings have 2 different targets to hit across those 2 different performance metrics. One we'd really like to see California look at, and governments within California, would be water use intensity. Obviously, as a state that is very dry and is going to get drier, water use intensity is a super important thing for us to monitor. It's important that we reduce water usage in buildings. And then there's these 2 are a bit more complicated. So coincident peak demand is a difficult one. We commented to CEC that we think that coincident peak demand should be part of Senate Bill 48 and the BPS law that comes out of that. We think that California is the only state in the US that has the utility infrastructure and monitoring to be able to actually measure the coincident peak demand accurately. And again, another one for California that would be good to see would be indoor air quality. Obviously, with lots of dust in the air, we want to make sure that people are breathing healthy air. In our law as well, we also have anti-displacement measures. There's affordable housing protections in there, and also making sure that owners that need additional flexibility can get it. We want to make sure that the law is created in a way that building owners are encouraged and targets are set in a way that it's easiest for the building owners to comply with the law and meet the targets. But there will be times where they need flexibility. They might need their timeline for reaching a target extended, or they might need the target completely changed. Maybe they can only get to 90% of what the target says. So our law does have flexibility in there. So in terms of the format that we suggest for a building performance standard, we created this model called the trajectory model. And so what this does is, you can see at the far right, that's the final standard that we would expect this building to make. So these are just 3 hypothetical buildings, building A, B, and C. And we're going to assume that they are all a commercial office. They're all commercial office buildings. So they all have the same final target because they're all commercial office buildings, and we're going to assume that they're the same size as well. Now, they have different baselines because one of them might be older, one of them might be retrofitted more recently, one of them might have a really good building manager who knows exactly what they're doing and can get the most energy efficiency out of their building. So they have different baselines, they have different interim standards, but they have the same final standard. So that makes it so that it is fair across the whole sector. And also it makes it so that these buildings can make improvements in ways that make sense and on timelines that make sense to them. Obviously, with the caveat of they still have these interim targets they have to meet. They can't say, oh, well, I just don't want to meet my targets. In our BPS law, they would be fined for failing to meet their targets. And so in terms of a compliance example, this is, again, using the trajectory approach. And like I said, building owners often like to go for things like lighting upgrades, building tune-ups. Those are low-cost solutions that bring sort of, incremental savings that then help us build into paying for more expensive upgrades. So an envelope upgrade or mechanical upgrade. And so they're meeting all of the targets on that trajectory approach, but their performance is not a linear decrease like that. And again, we want to make sure that building owners can make the changes that they need in the timeline that makes sense to them, while still making them make those improvements and hit their targets. And we have a wealth of resources on IMT's website. I can share a couple of these afterwards if it's helpful, but we have the model building performance standard, our short model building performance standard. We also have a whole implementation guide that is based on lessons learned from all of the different governments so far that have implemented BPS laws. So that was published in 2022, so it's still pretty recent. And then we have some social priorities working here as well. So we have something on housing affordability, resiliency, and then also ventilation and indoor air quality. And those are pieces that are to complement building performance standards laws. Now, in terms of the effort that we expect a government to have to put in to implement and enforce a BPS law, there's a couple of different variables in here. And like it says in this title, some of these are independent of the number of buildings covered. Some of these are dependent on that. So for example, in terms of the communications that need to go out to make building owners know that the building performance standard is a thing that is going to happen, make them aware of the target that they have to reach, that is entirely dependent on how many buildings would be covered by the law. So we've seen it, I think in Boston, for example, they'd sent out thousands of mailers to all of the buildings that would be covered by this law. I think the best response rate that they actually ended up getting was something like 85 to 90%, which is fantastic. That was really difficult for them. It took a lot of time. It cost a lot of money. And so these are the things that we would flag any government that's considering a building performance standard law. So a lot of this is based on research that came out from the Department of Energy. They did a focus on the administration side of BPS, basically. And so over on the independent side, we have things like overseeing the BPS implementation, assessing the building performance, the technical resourcing on the inside for the department that is implementing the law, making sure the web portal works for building owners uploading their building performance for a compliance period, and then making sure there's outreach as well, and there's supporting equity in terms of the BPS design and implementation. Those are all things that can be varied by the capacity of the government, the funding they have, what staff experience they have, what staff experience they can bring in. That can look very, very different depending on the government and only the government. Whereas on the dependent side, these are all going to sort of track in a certain way depending on how many buildings we have covered by this. And so one that's often very difficult is auditing and validating the building performance reports. Building owners sometimes are completely in the dark about how their building operates. They don't know anything about it. They just own it. They don't know, they don't care. And so communicating to them what they need to do, when they need to do it, and then auditing the data they provide can be really, really difficult. There's often issues as well with utilities not providing the data that the building owner is supposed to report to the government. So in Columbus, for example, they are having a really tough time where the gas aggregator there for multifamily properties is saying that they cannot aggregate and pull all of the information together for covered multifamily properties under their benchmarking law because it violates privacy laws. It doesn't, but that's what the utility says, and they're not doing that because of that. And then in terms of the enforcement as well, more buildings means that there is more chance for buildings to not comply with the law or to require, like it says here, exemptions, alternative compliance pathways, or special cases. So the more buildings we have, the more staff time this is going to take in, the more resources this is going to take in. And so, yeah, in terms of things that I would encourage Menlo Park to think about, these things on the right are the sticking points, and these ones are the ones that are going to get trickier depending on Menlo Park's specific circumstances. In terms of the level of effort, these figures are slightly out of date, but these are some examples that are in our implementation guide, the BPS implementation guide that I mentioned a minute ago. So there's some examples there. Montgomery County, they have just under 1,900 buildings covered under their BPS law. They have 7 staff working full-time on this, and their budget is 1.1 million. Now, new research from DOE shows that for DC, for example, they now have 10 full-time staff members rather than 7. So they've pushed their staffing numbers up quite a lot. And then Denver is not in here, but Denver now has 9 staff members as well. I can't quite remember off the top of my head how many buildings are covered. I think it's in the ballpark of the DC number. It might be slightly less, but Denver are very, very well resourced. In terms of things to think about in California, BayREN, which DOE has funded through an IRA codes application with San Francisco, they could create some shared BPS infrastructure, so things like shared IT, shared rules, IT help desk, that would make it easier for smaller governments to adopt and implement a BPS law. So BayREN would be something that I would highlight here in terms of the level of effort and the budget for this. Now, in terms of alternatives to BPS, there are a lot of different stages across the lifetime of a building where we can implement different things. We can hit them with different policy options to try and decarbonize them. So early on, we have, sorry, just give me a second, my computer's frozen. Okay, here we go. The design and construction of a building, the 2 earliest parts. Now we want to hit those with stringent codes. We want to make sure that those buildings are designed well and run well. And then there's also some zoning, planning, green building laws as well. And then obviously a clean heat standard is something that can be considered as well, making sure that buildings are not allowed to have natural gas infrastructure. Once the building's been constructed, it's an existing building. And so this is where we would encourage the use of things like benchmarking. So benchmarking, like I said, is the process of making sure that building owners gather how much energy that they are using and then report that to the government. And often that can bring about some pretty significant savings in terms of building owners making improvements. Like I said, some building owners, they don't know how their buildings run. It's not important to them. When they see how much money they can save based on this benchmarking information, a lot of them will make those changes quite quickly. And then we move into some different sections here. So 15 years for single family, 20 to 30 years after for commercial and large multifamily buildings. That's when we need to start replacing equipment. And so we could have an electrification law, which makes it so that the building owner has to replace fossil fuel systems for electrified systems. We would want to have a building performance standard cover in this space. Again, a major renovation can be covered by codes. And then there's obviously this bottom part here is an important one to think about, the utility incentives and policies. And then we have the building's death, or it is demolished. And so we want to make sure that they are demolished in a way that is reasonable. We want to make sure that as much of the materials that can be recycled are recycled. We want to make sure things that are reused can be reused. And then at the bottom, this one just sneaked in here. This one goes almost all of the way across. Unfortunately, not quite to demolition yet, I don't think. Is federal finance and tax policy. There are federal incentives the entire way along this to encourage building owners or building designers to make buildings efficient. Now, in terms of some policy options other than BPS, and these are specifically on residential properties, these are a couple of different things that governments are in the process of adopting. So the first one there, a residential labeling policy, that basically makes an incentive for a seller or a potential landlord to make energy efficiency improvements in their buildings. So I, as a potential buyer of a unit within a multifamily property, a buyer of a whole multifamily property, or a buyer of a single family home, I would be entitled to request and see the energy efficiency and utility bills or some variation of those within the potential lease or sale of a building. And so in terms of how this drives the incentive to make those improvements, why am I going to buy a house that is going to cost me $700 a year to heat when the one identical just down the road is only going to cost me $200 to heat? And so it makes it so that building owners, they need to remain competitive, they need to make sure that they're making improvements. A retrofit policy would be a next thing that we would consider. So that's going to encourage efficiency improvements and electrification by mandating flexible improvement requirements. And an example of this is Marin County, for example. If a property is having a retrofit, and this applies to single family homes as well, that covers, I think it's something like 50% of the square footage or more, there are flexible energy efficiency and electrification options that the building owner needs to take to make sure that they can actually go ahead with that retrofit. There's lots of different options. There's a menu of different things that they can pick from in Marin County that are linked to, so there's things like making sure all of the lights are LEDs. That scores low on the list. Making sure you have a heat pump, that's high on the list and gets you more points. You have to hit a minimum number of points for your permit to go through and for you to basically actually be able to do the work. Rental heating and cooling policies are something that a lot of governments are starting to consider. So that's encouraging landlords to make efficiency improvements, because, and particularly if they are paying the utility bill for the property that they are leasing. But these are basically requirements that, depending on the local climate and the climate zone, they provide a minimum heating or cooling level within the properties that they lease. And then finally, the bottom one there, utility bill protection from heating and cooling. So this is basically a policy that makes it so that utilities can't shut off systems or services due to missed payments in extreme heat or extreme cold. In terms of examples of some of these, so Boulder has a smart regs program, which it covers licensed rental housing in Boulder, and they have to make energy improvements to be able to actually get the rental license. And this is just one part of the rental license approval process. It's not all of it, but they have to get to an efficiency score there on the home energy rating system. And they also have a prescriptive pathway where the city has laid out different things that the building owner can do. If they do those, they will be granted their housing license. And so there's a link to the model lease there, and there's also the guidebook there as well. Ann Arbor is doing a lot of interesting things as well. So there's a link there to the page that's a central hub for a lot of their building performance and building decarbonization work. So they have a commercial building benchmarking policy. They also have a green rental housing policy, which they're still developing that, but that is similar to the Boulder law, where you have to make efficiency improvements to actually be granted a housing license. And then they have a sustainability concierge as well, which is a really, really cool thing that they just launched, where the city will pay for an audit of your property, and someone from the city will come in and look through your property, audit, make recommendations for efficiency improvements that you can make, and that's all paid for by the city. So nice for cities that have bucket loads of money. They did manage to leverage this by increasing their taxes. The city as a whole voted to increase their taxes. I can't remember what percentage, which helps actually pay for this. And that is the end of my slides. I will pause for any questions, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you guys.
Very good.
All right, why don't we start out with any clarifying questions from the EQC before we take public comment? Anything for James?
Would you repeat the entire presentation?
Do you have video recording of things like this that we can digest more slowly?
Well, we'll have a recording of this meeting.
Yeah, but other material, related material.
Other questions. Maybe you said this, I missed it, but it's like, what are the typical like carrots and sticks for helping to implement a building performance standard?
So the main carrot that is offered is incentives put up by the city to make it so that early adopters and people that invest early on to make improvements, they get money from the city or the state. So for example, Washington State has an early adopter incentive program where, and there's limits to this, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but you will get, if you make improvements early on, a percentage of your project costs will be paid for by the state of Washington. The sticks are the fines, and so those are normally set to the square footage of your building and the amount that you missed your target by. And so one thing we would also recommend putting in there is the assessed value of the property, like a super small fraction of that, but that makes it so that building owners that have higher assessed property values face higher fines. And so we know those building owners have more ready access to capital. And so we want to make sure that the stick, as it were, that is over their head is heavier than the one for a naturally occurring affordable housing. But those are the main sticks, would be fines that are levied against the building owner for not reaching a target in a deadline.
Cool. Thank you.
Just building on Commissioner Meyer's question, you'd mentioned early on DC was first in the nation. Could you just speak a little bit more about what part DC is implemented? Is it just the policy, or is it the enforcement? Is it how built out is the DC model, I guess, is maybe what I'm asking.
So they are just getting to their first year where buildings are having to meet a target and report whether they met that or not. So I don't think any fines have actually been levied yet, but they have gone through the process of educating building owners about this, making sure that they know that this is a thing you have to comply with at some point. They've not actually got to any fines being levied yet.
Perfect.
I have a similar question. You mentioned that the California Energy Commission was moving a bit in this direction. Can you tell a bit more about that? I mean, what are their plans that you're aware of at this point?
So they are legally required to create a strategy report that will go to the legislature in California and will make recommendations for what a building performance standard is going to look like. So it's pretty vague. Senate Bill 48, which is the language for this, is very vague. It just says buildings over 50,000 square feet will be made to make improvements. So they have that deadline of, I think it's June 2026, where they have to report that back to the legislature. The legislature will then take action based on that. In terms of things that CEC are doing, the main thing that they're focused on at the moment is they just put out a request for proposals for, I think it was $9 million, where they're asking, they're opening up for people to come to them and make recommendations for how they should reach out to stakeholders. And then as part of that, one thing they're asking as well is that anyone that gets that award also does some audits of buildings and sets out pathways for how they would comply with a building performance standard. And so they just released that request for proposals. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. But that's the main thing they're focusing on, and that will inform the strategy report, which will be the recommendations that go to the legislature. And so it's kind of clear as mud as to what it's going to look like.
So CEC works on 3-year cycles. These sound like something that would be for 2 cycles from now, possibly? Given they just finished one, they are just finishing 1 cycle now.
So I'm not sure on their cycles, but I know that the deadline for them to submit that report is June 2026.
Okay, thanks.
Question on Bayren. 2 questions really. Is there a specific contact at Bayren that you would suggest we talk to? And are you aware of them working with any other cities in the peninsula on projects like this already?
So I don't know anyone at Bayren, but I can definitely ask other people at IMT to try and get a contact for you guys. And the same on the second question. I don't know what their current plans are, but I can ask people and get back to you guys on that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, Ms. Owner, do we have any public comments?
Yeah, and I'm just gonna share for courtesy for James, we go into public comment and then have a full discussion. So let us know when you need to hop off. Okay. We go into public comment. If there's any comment in the room, do you have a card?
I'll draw it.
Okay. Great. And then if you're online, if you can press the raise hand button or press *9 if you're calling in from a landline. Give it a moment for folks. Yeah, I don't see any online. And we have one in the room. Okay. We have one public comment from Brian Schmidt. When you're ready.
Sure, thanks. Brian Schmidt from Menlo Spark. Great presentation, by the way. Thank you. Comments and then questions if the EQC wants the questions addressed. The comment, first of all, is I think 2 things that are very interesting about this is, first of all, that it addressed existing buildings. It seems like much of the effort that's been seen in Menlo Park is for new construction. And existing buildings is where most of the emissions are coming from, that will come from between now and 2030. Secondly, that address large buildings and commercial buildings, which again has not been the primary focus. And again, is where most of the emissions are coming from, is commercial buildings. So I see some real advantages in that. In fact, I would say if Menlo Park chooses not to do building performance standards, then it should probably consider what it is going to do instead of building performance standards to address existing buildings and commercial structures. Then regarding some questions, I'm particularly interested in any more information about how small cities can work with building performance standards. I looked through that map, tried to pick out some small cities. I saw City of Adena in Minnesota, I think, about twice the size, a little less than twice the size of us. I don't know if there's any other comparables. And whether Bay Run has similar other questions on Bay Run, whether they have stated that they are interested in helping cities to building performance standards together. And then I was also interested in the focus on Ann Arbor. The reason being that's one of the few other cities I'm aware of that, like Menlo Park, has a 2030 community-wide carbon neutrality goal. So I'm curious if there's any more information that James has on how they intend to use that, especially in correlation with a building performance standard that usually goes far beyond 2030. Are these goals at all in conflict, or is it just seen as some type of backup standard? If I could throw in one more question, it would be that California has that energy performance standard software that it will be using in the upcoming energy code. I don't know if that's at all useful in this context. It's much more sophisticated, I think, than some of the other measurement systems that are used. So I don't know if that's already been used in this type of building performance standard analysis or not. I thought I'd throw that. Thanks.
Thank you. And we don't have any other public comments. I return the meeting to you, Chair.
All right, fantastic. So why don't we open it for EQC discussion? And this won't need a motion at the end, just so everybody's aware, this is all informational, so. Okay.
Is James allowed to address the public comment? And if so, maybe give him the opportunity to do that first?
We can ask that, yeah, I mean, I think we asked the question, because I was about to do that,
Okay.
Can we answer those questions if that's okay, because the small city one was top of mind for us as well. I don't know how many buildings we have that hit that threshold, it doesn't feel like a lot. So, did you catch all those, James, around Ann Arbor and the questions for smaller cities?
So for smaller cities, I think one of the most important things that smaller cities can try and focus on doing is supporting building performance standards that are being implemented at higher levels. So, that is a way to make sure that Menlo Park is speaking to CEC and can support CEC when a building performance standard for California as a whole comes into place. When you look at their benchmarking law, it's not, the compliance rate is not good. And a lot of that is because California is a massive state. It's a huge economy. There's lots of buildings covered. And so reaching out to all of those buildings and making sure, we have the correct postal address, making sure that the business address that we have is actually a business address we can reach the building owner at. Those are the types of things that at that state level are really, really difficult. At the local level, there is a better chance that the permits officer or the building code enforcement office, they know the building owners. And so supporting BPS at the higher level is often the best thing that smaller governments can do. In terms of designing and adopting and enforcing a BPS, like I said, we've not seen anything happen at sub 25,000 square feet really. And like I said, the main reason for that is because these building owners don't have the ready access to capital that larger building owners do. And also one of the other reasons is that smaller cities don't have the staff available, they don't have the funding available, they don't have the IT resources. A BPS is a big lift. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, but it can reap great rewards. So I think the thing that I try and preach to small cities that are interested in this is, if you're super ambitious, go for it. I'm working with Aspen at the moment in Colorado, probably one of the best resource cities across the US. They're trying to design and adopt a BPS that might go as low as 5,000 square feet. The issue with that in Aspen is that then hits single family homes, and making building owners who are single family homeowners comply with something over a time frame is political suicide. And so it's tough. And I would say the main thing that local governments can do, smaller governments can do, is support BPS that is coming in at a higher level. I can't quite remember the Ann Arbor question.
Rearticulate.
Yeah.
Ann Arbor has a 2030 goal for achieving community-wide climate neutrality, as does Menlo Park. These building performance standards probably have goals that extend far beyond that. So did Ann Arbor perceive a conflict, or for that matter, do you perceive a conflict in a very strong goal that is a short-term goal that doesn't quite fit the building performance standard long-term?
So I'm not so familiar with how their BPS work is progressing. I know they have a commitment to pass one, but I haven't spoken to them about that, and I'm not sure what their time frame is for that. I know that they have policies in place to address lots of different parts. So they have, like I said, they have their benchmarking law, they have their green rental housing law they're working on, they have their energy concierge one. Another one they have is a focus on making sure that people can age in place. I think it's called aging in place or something like that, the policy, where they're trying to make it so that people who are elderly and might have to move out of their home at some point into assisted living facilities, making sure that the city can help pay for some retrofits and pay for energy efficiency improvements. You know, if we're putting a chairlift in the stairs, we might as well do some other work and see what else we can do. And so that's trying to make sure that the building stock is more efficient, and making sure that people can stay in the homes that they have lived in for a long time. They can stay there longer. Now, Aspen, I know, have aggressive climate goals. I think they have, I can't remember what their reduction is by 2030, but one thing they're running up against, like you've said, is designing the BPS, getting the targets in place, and then giving building owners enough time to get to that. It's proving really difficult in Aspen, because there's a lot of pushback from building owners. There's a lot of powerful building owners that don't want to make these investments, and so they are, you know, slowing the process down to some degree. And so I would say BPS is very good at, on 5-year increments, making sure we can get to timescales. So we had the end goal, but then the interim targets. And so the interim targets, we would recommend those be on a 5-year cycle to match with capital cycles for most buildings. So like you've said, if there's a really aggressive climate goal by 2030, we're in 2024, I don't think we're going to have enough time for a BPS to really be addressing the targets that Menlo Park wants to hit.
Just want to, sorry, just before we shift gears, maybe this is us, is a reach code the closest equivalent we would have, given all the challenges that James articulated? Is that the closest equivalent for the city? Or I guess what I'm trying to get is dig into Brian's question a little bit more and say, are there parts of this we can adopt? What would it look like if we did a mini version of this? And is that a reach code, or is it something else? It's probably more philosophical, just question about what could we do given all the constraints?
Well, the reach codes are for construction, right?
Right. It's all
New construction.
Yeah.
Are they all for new construction though, or? Okay.
Right,
Which could address existing buildings.
That's what I thought, but then is that the closest equivalent to this, given how challenging BPS is for a city our size? We don't have to debate that forever. It's more a question.
Well, I'll just say, like, when the building subcommittee made its presentation, we discussed building performance standards as being a complement to policy code, reach codes, for example. So my thought was that if this was something the city could take on, it could take on a building performance standard in conjunction with a reach code that said, when your gas water heater burns out, you have to replace it with electric.
Yeah.
So you're sort of attacking it from a few different angles.
Okay, got it. So it's complementary, not either or.
I don't know, James, does that make sense?
That makes sense, and that's the approach that Denver has taken. So their building performance standard law, I think it tops out the lower limit for large buildings is 20 to 25,000 square feet. Buildings underneath that, all the way down to 5,000 square feet, when they are replacing any heating system for air or heating or cooling system for air or for water, they need to switch out to an electrified alternative. And so that, like you said, would be part of the code approach of this, where things that we maybe wouldn't want to touch with a BPS, when you're retrofitting or when you're switching things out, we would make it so that you are incentivized to make efficient electrified choices.
Yeah. See, going through your presentation, there was one slide where you specifically talk about residential. I think it's 219 or something like that. So most of the presentation is about big buildings. On that one, you were going into specifics about residential, which is much closer to the things that we have normally being involved with. I wonder whether you could just go to that slide and go over it a bit again, and why is that slide in there? Because I mean, I think that doing that type of thing is easier for us to build on. So in particular, it's hard to do it for existing building, but some of those milestones are like major remodel, which normally there is money for major remodel, and there is demolition, there is money for demolition because they are going to build something in there. So those are events in which things can happen.
Is this the slide
Yes.
you're referring to?
Sorry?
Was this the right slide?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thanks.
So these are policies that are currently in place across the US, and some of them are taking place in single family homes. Let me just pull up. I can't remember the name of the city off the top of my head.
I think
but
that this is much closer to what we are already doing. Although like the labeling thing, remember I mentioned it a few meetings ago?
Mhm.
Portland has a labeling law.
Berkeley has one too.
Berkeley too.
Would you refresh my memory, in terms of Menlo Park's, greenhouse gas emissions? Do we have a breakdown of how much of it is between residential versus commercial? Because we do have significant, very large commercial buildings, particularly new ones coming in. How does that break down? Where is our?
2/3
2/3 which way?
commercial.
2/3 of it's commercial.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I don't know is how much of that is going to be impacted by the new development on from Meta. I mean, all of that is new, right? So all of that is going to be up to code, and that's going to reduce our percentage of greenhouse emission, because all of that is going to be good.
Well, Willow Village is mixed residential and commercial.
Right.
And who knows if it gets built.
And I think overall, having those buildings will increase the emissions of the city.
I don't know. I mean, because the previous, it depends on when we measure numbers, right? Because it was old building, it was very inefficient. The new buildings should be very efficient. All of that is in construction, and then all of that is regulated.
I thought it was a
Yeah,
little tear down and a big.
yeah.
I think, well, for me, the purpose of this presentation was how do we start with thinking about decarbonizing existing buildings?
Yeah. So my understanding is what James is describing is that the CEC is beginning to look into that pretty seriously. When I talked about labeling, and then I started to work based on labeling, that came from a CEC presentation. But I mean, as James pointed out, these cycles are very long. CEC is just finishing, they have not finished the 2025. So they are beginning to get data for the 2028 number cycle. So these things take forever.
But I have a similar question, sorry, not a question. I forget where you did it, but Vice Chair McKenna, I think you made a public comment to City Council maybe last week around we are here and we said we're gonna be here and we need to move it X times the pace, that's something I won't forget. And I guess the question for this group is, whilst we can't do this, there's a political will question coming up for city council in future years about how much forcing versus pace versus is this a real goal? I think you laid down the gauntlet of, is this a real goal or are we just putting it out there and plodding along? And a version of this with some, dare I use the word, teeth behind it, is one way to get to our goals faster. So I guess the question, city council won't do that on their own. So the question is, does that bubble up in our work plan? Does a version of this kind of fall in there, knowing that people are opposed to the sticks and carrots mode? Maybe they like carrots, but nobody in city council seems to like sticks. So anyway, it's more of a, I don't know what to call that. It's more a comment of going like, this just further opens my eyes to, it's one way we could go, but it'll be putting in front of the council and saying like, you got to decide, are we serious about these goals or are we not? And then there are trade-offs. So I'm not saying that, sorry, James, that was a little bit more philosophical about where we are and where we need to go, but this is one sort of mechanism to kind of help us move faster, or a version of this as a mechanism. And is that something that could be teed up? And then just put it to council and
So James, you talked specifically about Aspen. Is that a city you are familiar with? Can you expand a bit on how the politics worked in there? Because they have money, but it sounded like it was problematic there.
We don't have big
Yes.
commercial. That's the thing with it. They have a lot of retail and then a lot of residential. But we've got this wild card of very large commercial buildings and very large office buildings. And the question is, are the politics better around trying to do something that focuses on the large commercial buildings? Or are we better off doing something that focuses on a relatively small residential? So it's just more of a thought versus
Yeah.
Aspen than.
Yeah, Aspen is, like you said, they're a well-resourced city, and unfortunately, they're facing a lot of opposition from real estate owners within the city. And I think, like you guys have just said, there is a question to be asked of, we have committed to these climate targets. Are you willing to make enforce the aggressive things that we need to do to make these targets? So for example, one thing in Aspen that people kept bringing up was oxygenation rooms because of the altitude there. How do we decarbonize an oxygenation room? I don't know. I don't know how we do that. The question is like, does Aspen want to still have a ski season? That would be the more appropriate question.
I'm pretty sure they do.
James, I'm looking at the cities that have adopted or passed the BPS. Chula Vista, I'm not totally familiar with it, but it's not a huge city. It's probably bigger than ours, but can you just talk about the process that city went through? Like a timeline of when they started thinking about a BPS and when they ultimately passed it, and sort of where they are now?
So they're in the implementation stage where they have all of the rules and regulations, and buildings have targets that they have to meet, but they haven't hit those first dates where they have to meet the targets by. In terms of the timeline, I'm not sure. And they passed their BPS law, I think in 2019, which is before I even moved to the US. So I'm sorry, I don't know the context for Chula Vista. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
So do you know whether they have already started, they already had done the benchmarking?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I would say that everyone needs to think about as well, is there are ways where if there's not a benchmarking law in place, we can look at the climate zone, look at the building stock and work out rough targets that buildings should hit. However, building owners, understandably, every building is a special snowflake, and so they will say, no, my building's different. I want data from my buildings to make sure that sets the target. And so in terms of the amount of benchmarking years that we would recommend, 3 years. So that gives you options in terms of you can let the building owners pick the best year for them. So they could pick the year that they performed the worst as their target, so they can come down from there. Or you can take an average over 2 years or the 3 years and let them pick from that. But in terms of, like I said, there are ways to get around it without the benchmarking data. One of my colleagues on the policy team at IMT Marshall, he wrote a paper specifically on this. So there are ways around with not having full benchmarking data, but most cities want 3 years of benchmarking data to then set the targets for a BPS.
Is your feeling that asking for benchmarking will trigger, even just asking for benchmarking will trigger pushback, or is that a significantly safer? I mean, it was going to be safer than being more strong, but what's your feeling about, based on experience? Is that something that will fly, or people will say not even benchmark?
No, a benchmarking is definitely viable. There's something like, I think there might be nearly 60 governments across the US that have benchmarking laws. And like we said, the state of California already has a benchmarking law for 50,000 square feet and above. And a lot of the time, you're right, building owners will push back and say, this is going to cost me too much money. It's going to take too much time. It doesn't take that much time. It doesn't cost that much money. I think if you got a contractor, and it would be a few $100s per year for you to get the information. If you did it in-house as a building owner, it would be a trivial amount of hours of work to get that information. And then, like I've said, building owners often don't know or don't care how their building is operating. We could expect to see savings from just benchmarking. So, you know, some governments have seen savings of 10% in buildings just because they were benchmarking, and then, you know, they could realize, oh, it turns out we're running the air conditioning all night when no one's here. Why have we never thought of turning that off before? The benchmarking led us to realize that. Let's do something about it.
Thank you.
Brisbane is a city that's doing benchmarking. Do you think that will lead to a BPS? Maybe Sustainability Manager Launder knows about Brisbane and what they're doing and where they're headed. Either of you have thoughts on that?
I'll let James answer first and much more.
I don't know the Brisbane context, but I do know that not always, but people like to pass benchmarking before BPS, but I don't know specifically about Brisbane.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. The only context I have from Brisbane is I remember it was an extensive public outreach process, and I went to several of their workshops early on in the development of their ordinance, maybe 2017, 2018. But I don't know if I could follow up with their sustainability manager there.
James, just a similar question, and I can't get my head out of this sort of implementation mode of this, so. Just probably more your opinion than anything else, so if we do nothing with this because of the constraints and the challenges, we won't make progress. So that's sort of, to me, one end of the spectrum or the base. And I think we probably all know that there's not political will to turn this around, try to make this happen the right way. So somewhere in between is where my brain is going. What I'm sort of seeing kind of map out is potentially do some benchmarking first to start to do the outreach, educate potentially both residential and commercial business owners so that they're aware. And then what do you think about the part where the political will gets really squidgy is enforcement and imposing fines. So I almost wonder if there's a phased approach to this that could be useful for smaller cities around build some awareness, build some benchmarking, have a grace period of no enforcement and no fines, and maybe you don't get a lot of adoption, but at least people are starting to understand and join the conversation, and then saying in 28, the enforcement will start. So giving people chance to acclimate to where we're headed, as opposed to either making a binary, do nothing or do the extreme. And doing the extreme probably wouldn't pass city council. So I'm thinking of a graduated approach with a grace period around enforcement. Have you seen anybody doing that? And what's your view of how that might work?
So I think that's definitely the approach that most smaller cities and smaller governments are going to need to take. Good should not be the enemy of perfect. And, you know, like you've said, there is often struggles around political will, and, you know, in terms of making those aggressive changes. So yeah, making sure people benchmark, encouraging them to do so, letting them know the benefits around it, letting them know that, you know, this will become mandatory at some point, but at the moment, we're just gonna let you give it a go and see what happens. That's definitely something that could be considered. And within that, like we discussed, you might want to have some code things in there or time of replacement things to think about.
Thanks.
So I haven't had an experience with home energy analytics. I don't know if any of you have spent time with them, but they're essentially free for us, funded by PG&E based on the energy savings a homeowner experiences as a result of the recommendations they're making. And I'm wondering if there's an organization like that, or if we could entice HEA to expand also to commercial buildings to do the analysis that they do, because it's pretty incredible. You just download your PG&E data and they're able to, you know, pinpoint, like, what are you doing on Sunday nights? Why is there this spike of energy usage then? And it really helps you understand the impact of the actions that you're taking or not. And they just seem like a really great resource that we could potentially tap into for additional support around commercial.
And Nancy's made me think that, you know, what's really interesting is if we did that sort of multi-stage journey, it's better than doing nothing for one, but there's all these capabilities we need to get in place as we go as well. So it gives us a little time. I think what a lot of people will complain about is like, oh, I don't know how to get a vendor for analysis, or I can't, you know, there's nobody who can solve my water heater, or, you know, all the complaints of, if you go through the journey, it's still a really big pain in the tail. So it gives us a little time to build in capability to take that journey as well. And so by having a grace period with enforcement or a not mandatory phase or whatever, we could be building out, making that journey easier as well. So it's just something to think about.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, James, that this presentation has been really informative, and I love that you touched on all of the things that we've been up against, like how to deal with commercial, how to deal with the social justice issues. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to lay it out so clearly. I feel like we have such a great, I feel more informed, much more informed about the options that we have for proceeding. So thank you for taking the time and for staying up late to support us on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, James.
All right, so I think that was closing that one up. Why don't we move on to D3? And we can push through that one very quickly and then decide if we want to take a quick break.
Your slides up, Jen.
Yeah, sounds good. So maybe while those are getting teed up, I wanted to add a little context to this agenda item, because as we were talking about what to cover, I started to dig into the city's general plan. And what was interesting is the general plan has two main parts. It has land use and it has circulation, transportation, right? But I mean, if you really need to be bored one day, like just read through that from end to start to finish. And, you know, it's literally just a series of programs and policies and things like that. Some of which you're going to recognize and some of which you go, oh, I didn't even know like that was a thing. So one of the things that caught me off guard was working with schools. You know, we often talk about these jurisdictions being very separate and governed differently. The fire district school has a school board, and then we have the city council to govern the city. But in our general plan, it's meant for us to be more collaborative. When you read a couple, I was going to try to pull them up, but don't need to be that geeky, but it basically just says we should be working more together to improve the overall quality of education, et cetera, et cetera. So it got me thinking that Vice Chair McKenna and I are part of an advisory commission that I think we've alluded to a few times with Menlo Park City School District to help superintendent come up with what could a climate action plan look like for a school district. And because as EQC, I think we're more residents in that than EQC members. We're just doing that thing of switching our hats and going, we've got a lot of expertise. We want to help you on this journey. And so they're very amenable to it. The process is kicked off. We've had 3 or 4 meetings. And then I think most of you are aware, Measure U, the school bond, what they don't talk about a lot, but I think we've talked about is that's actually the first phase in the journey for the CAP. So Kristen's feedback on this was like, this is really great. This gets us thinking about what we want to do downstream, but we're going to start with the school bond first, and then we're going to be pulling pieces of this together. So it felt a little timely to share this because school bond is in November, right? So it's a way to kind of say, all right, now that you've seen what we shared with Kristen, what could the EQC continue to do to collaborate with the school district and help them have their own CAP plan? And then, like, I saw Gina this morning at a different meeting, and like, we can pull in Ravenswood, we can pull in the other schools. I think we're only starting with Menlo Park City School District because Kristen has sort of pulled us together and really been excited about doing a climate action plan. So that's a little bit of like why this is on the agenda. November's getting close. What happens after the bond passes? They're going to debate that as a school system, and I think the advisory committee is going to talk about that. And there may be a chance for somebody to join that committee as well, because I think I'll have to drop off, I think. But like, if somebody's interested in working with the school, then I think Kristen might take another member. So wanted to show you, I think there's only 5 or 6 slides. Yeah, so the way we put it together was it wasn't very useful to take the city's climate action plan and say, here's what the city's doing, because it's not a one-on-one translation to the school district. They've got bus fleets and they've got, garden spaces. It's a very different environment in some ways. And so this was a way to kind of say, there's different areas of opportunity when you think about a climate action plan. And then what we're proposing to her is that the city school district should get the teachers and other stakeholders together and figure out what's the most relevant and appealing things to be working on as you kind of go on this journey as a school district. So the potential steps we talked about with her are there activities that are chosen by this working group? Can you do an annual plan that encompasses all the different schools? Can you involve other partners? I think most of you have heard, I feel strongly like we need to do a much better job of always getting nonprofits, government, education, and folks to work together. So this was just kind of preaching that to her, making sure that there's funding, and then really measuring. So this basic sort of potential steps was a way to help Kristen frame this idea of how do you turn this into an actual plan? There's a few goals and strategies up here. These are just first drafts. These were just thinking points for her as they started to work on this. So the way this is constructed, I'm not going to read all this, but this is mostly informational so everybody can see it. There's sort of 10 areas. As we clustered all this stuff together, there's a lot of things when you're building a climate action plan that you can do, a lot of choices you can make. So this idea of, okay, making sure there's regular education for the teachers and students and staff and parents, that's kind of the red block there. And then looking at, what's the current impact and how ready is the school district for things that might happen either on a crisis or for their current environmental impact. So the red is a little bit more kind of getting the ball rolling. The orangish and yellowish is more different kinds of topics, and green, I guess, as well. These are some sort of 3 big areas we all recognize. Energy saving and efficiency measures, partially the bond will cover some of this, but there are other programs clearly that can go into that. Waste reduction and recycling, pretty straightforward, and then saving water with conservation. Those are sort of some program choices. Each of these has a double click behind it and another double click. But this was just to get people thinking about where would the teachers and students and other folks get excited? And then just some other things around, a big part of operating a big entity like this for the city is how do you purchase green versus not green? So things like energy and stuff like that. So that's why the bluish is a little bit about, how do you purchase and then how do you have more efficiency in things like your transportation, because that's a big thing for a school district as well. And then the purple is a little bit more catch-all. I think for most of you know, like we're pretty well canopy, so this idea of like green spaces and trees and all this other stuff should be part of a climate action plan. And then the last part is sort of a catch-all, but it's unique, which is great, is how do we then prepare students for great careers as well? So look at these as like 10 choice areas that teachers, as they develop this, they can go, oh, we really like that, and why don't we build a program here or there or that kind of thing. So I'll go through these really quickly. This was more so you were exposed to it. So in each of those 10, this is that sort of first double click down, which says, all right, well, here's what you can do. You can create targeted awareness campaigns, for example, to make sure that the community's aware. Or if you are in the yellow bucket there, the first item is you can improve each school's waste reduction policy and set a zero waste goal. So these are all thought pieces for someone who's a little more strategic with the school, who can kind of come in and go, oh yeah, we like that. We want to do water conservation because that's very tangible for our kids. And I think Kristen's talking about letting each school potentially come up with pieces of this as well. I mean, that's sort of still in motion as to whether this will be like a district-wide thing or if it'll be school by school and aggregated. But this is just, beyond that high-level category, the topic is people some thinking about what that could actually look like if you make that choice. And then the second slide does kind of the same thing. Like the invest in green spaces and trees, it's pretty straightforward. Create and maintain green spaces on school campuses. What does that look like? What kind of a program? Who you work with? It just sort of gets from the 10,000 foot level to the 5,000 foot level down to the 1,000 foot level. So that's sort of, as I said, super quick. I didn't want to bore you with all the bullets, but it's a process we're starting to go through that I think is really exciting, because honestly, what it really does is it gives the schools a more tangible footprint for how to do this work. I think they're inundated with a lot of like, hey, you can do this and you can pass this bill and you can do that and you can do solar and all. But I don't know that a lot of them have taken a step back and said, what does our climate action plan really look like? How do we do this in just the work we've been doing? How do we do this in a 3 to 5 year cycle and kind of stick with it? And then our ability to partner with the school as either residents or EQC or however that ends up shaping out. I think that's an important linkage because we have a lot of expertise that we can share and a lot of this journey we've gone through on pieces of this as well. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking. I wanted to make sure that everybody saw that. But we'll go through the process. So are there any clarifying questions about that before we take public comment?
Are there targets associated with each category or for the school district overall?
Not yet. The part that I didn't show you was the double click below. I'm happy to share, or we can share the link. There's another set of slides that goes a little bit deeper than that, but we didn't get to.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. No. So how about we see if there's any public comment?
Absolutely. If you're in the room and you'd like to make public comment, we have cards on the ledge over there. If you're on Zoom, you can hit the raise hand button either at the bottom of your screen or next to your name. And if you're calling in from a landline, you can press *9 and we'll be able to unmute you. There's no public comment in the room, and it doesn't look like there's any online or by phone. So I return the meeting to you, Chair.
Excellent. So do we have any discussion in the room about the topic? This is also informational, so there's no need for a motion or anything like that.
The main thing as I'm listening to this, I'm really, really appreciating what a great how-to this is, not only for Menlo Park City School District, but really any school district. So it feels like something that could be, I don't know, widely shared, like, hey, this is how one makes a climate action plan for schools. These are the things to think about. And it really taps into, I feel like your incredible strategic mind and your ability to connect all the dots. So I would love to see some version of this shared beyond our commission and beyond Menlo Park City School District. I don't know what that looks like, but I think it could be helpful to
Thank
many
you.
people.
The hope is that we I think Kristen is open to this, and I know we're being recorded, so I don't want to speak for her, but, you know, I think having a school already on that journey, though, is a powerful way to do that. So having this as a thought document is great, but then having a school kind of already 2 or 3 steps in, that could serve as a, I don't know what to call it, but an example. I think that there is a possibility to then sort of say, why don't we get more district superintendents together to talk to Kristen and learn from her? So that's about as far as I thought about sharing it widely, but I'd want to make sure they were rolling and going and everything else.
I just think this is a great resource. I think you've created something really thoughtful here. And the only one thing I didn't see is anything really about solar.
It might be buried under energy, so there's a category on energy, and so that's part of why it, I'm sure it's on some
Yeah.
backup slides.
Solar
but we can-
and batteries and that.
Yeah, it's sort of, there's blue and then energy team.
I think it was under orange.
I'll double check to make sure it's in there though, just because it's been a while since I looked at the.
Yeah,
full
but it doesn't
document.
say anything about solar there. That seems like an opportunity.
Yeah, there's about 12 or 15 more pages below this.
Got it. So
Yeah,
it's
sorry.
in there somewhere.
It wasn't a sort of, yeah, it didn't stop at this level, so I'll double check it.
Well, thank you for doing this work with the city or with the schools and for keeping us informed as well.
Would you like us to include the full deck in the minutes?
Yeah, it's a good idea. Why not? For people who want to geek out a little bit.
Nancy's comment provoked a memory. I seem to remember during the days when I was a transportation consultant for that school district, that there was a regular meeting of all of the administrative heads of the different private and public schools within the city. And also Atherton, when they would meet and line up and share and engage. It was perhaps twice a year, and they may well have already covered this topic, but it seems like that's an opportunity for the kind of sharing that Nancy mentioned.
Ironically, it's called Community Trust. That meeting was this morning. We didn't talk about this. You go around the room and like you talk about what you do. And so ironically, I was telling Zach that we talked about the next agenda item, the student engagement, when I came to my little sharing moment. But yeah, I could see that being part of Community Trust. It happens 4 times a year. It's run by Mount Bart City School District. And ironically, it happened this morning.
Jeff, I know that at least one of our local school districts, I forget which one, is already using the electric buses for bidirectional for resilience. Is that something that's already in discussion with the school district? Because that's a huge opportunity for climate
Is it
resilience.
like fleetification is?
Well, Menlo Park City School District has a fleet of electric buses, and we've suggested that they look into ways that they can use that resiliency. But I don't think they're at that point yet. But maybe there's another school district that.
Yeah, because that, all of that is happening very, very quickly now. Next year, there's going to be a big push.
I know that the school district is in touch and in conversations with a company that has a program around electronic school buses being used as batteries and resilience, and so they're underway.
Well, and honestly, it makes me think of this, the best practice sharing is key. I think the legislative connection down the road will be key as well. I mean, I think most of you know, like SB 1374, so we're pushing these things kind of ad hoc and, you know, they're all kind of coming, but they're not necessarily flowing into plans that the schools have. So there's a way potentially to connect this legislatively and best practices as well. Which that could be interesting.
Is there a like mechanism or point in the plan to get like the students involved and suggesting stuff?
So yeah, the work with Mrs. Ward is meant to be I wouldn't call it a pilot. That is it's sort of an example that student engagement works at a more technical level. And Kristen's aware, we've mentioned it a couple times, so she's super excited. As I was telling you, the principal at Oak Knoll apparently is very excited. So the next agenda item is meant to be a case study to say, student engagement works. Now, what if we had a climate action plan for the school? How do we get more students engaged in the climate action plan? So it's exactly the right kind of phase where I sort of would envision this happening next. Because just like we want students to participate in our climate action plan, imagine how exciting it is for students to participate in their school's climate action plan and create the darn thing and choose from those options. So yeah, it's exactly the direction I think it should go.
Got it.
All right. Yes, ma'am, please. Rachel.
Staying, I don't know, apprised of what the school district is doing is part of the work plan. And so I just wanted to make sure we got a kind of timeline check of when you think this cap will be kind of formally adopted or considered, or what the next steps might be, so that EQC can get an update.
I would say my best guess is, well, I missed this week's meeting, so I don't know if it was discussed, but.
Yeah, the plan would be to, I believe, present it to start working on it next year, present it to the board, and then it kind of gets adopted middle of 26.
Okay.
And part of that becomes the school, so the part that we didn't do that was too much for the school district to kind of take on at the same time it took on the bond work was exposing this to teachers and principals and administrators at different school, getting them to start thinking about it. So that might also be where there could be some consulting and some work and some engagement there. So as individual schools are thinking about stuff, they may want to come back to the EQC and ask questions, or so it's a little amorphous about how we would structure that engagement process, but I think it'll start pretty quick. All right, well, thanks for sitting through that one, but hopefully that's exciting. Yeah,
It's great.
I personally am super jazzed about getting that next generation doing real work on this stuff. Like that's, if this and the next agenda item gets high schoolers and fourth graders, sixth graders working on this, I think it'll be good. Okay, well, I think there's no motion needed there, but I think we can move on to D4, providing the recommendation on the student engagement plan. And I think I'll go quick on this one as well, because it's a continuation of some of our agenda items, and then guys jump in, please. So subcommittees work to kind of keep us moving at pace on the more specific, not the climate action example, but the more specific example of how would Mrs. Ward and other groups start to work with us on our climate action plan for the city. That's really what this is a continuation of. And just by way of context, as Rachel's pulling that up. So what we ended up doing was taking all your ideas from the last meeting, rewatching the video to make sure we captured it, which is a weird experience to rewatch our own video. But we sort of verbatim kind of captured all the notes, synthesized them in, looked at some other ideas. Rachel helped us then kind of condense that into something a little tighter. And then it's really just the sort of the next level of detail, incorporating pretty much all your feedback from the last meeting. And then I think our goal is, this isn't informational, this is emotion driven. So the idea here is this will be a motion to kind of move this officially forward from the subcommittee. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think as you'll get into in the presentation, some of it will be moving forward as volunteers and kind of moving out of the subcommittee and the EQC realm. But there are going to be some specific asks for the EQC around how to proceed with the Youth Advisory Commission and how to structure these meetings to be conducive for student engagement.
Yeah, exactly. Because that was a big part of what on the rewatch, and as we were talking about it, how to navigate what do we do? What are the roles? And actually, that's probably a good way to start is, so as we took this broader, bigger, a little more complex conversation, this was, as I said, this was how do we advise? It's basically updated based on our feedback, and then really just starting to get to real recommendations that could become part. The easiest way for me to wrap my brain around this, when I was sort of thinking about it, and then as Zach and and John were commenting on it, was like, let's create 4 categories. I don't know why my brain works this way, but like, I like to categorize stuff because it gets it. We can then debate whether it's the right category and the right subcategory and that kind of stuff. So the 4 kind of areas of work were, all right, who's really participating? And I think we had some pretty good agreement on what that would look like. And then what are our roles? I mean, this was a big part of the debate when we rewatched the whole thing, and we tried to kind of click some of that out. What do the projects look like as well? And so there's some examples of what those could look like. We didn't get to sort of infinite detail, but we got to kind of the next level detail. And then the 4th category was really, okay, how do we launch this thing? So once we've got our participation down and our roles and our projects, then like there's a launch plan that needs to be created. So that's why that kind of looks that way. And then we're going to kind of dive into each of those 4. So, all right, this is where I promise I will not read all this. But this was really trying to sort out, to keep it a little straight, there were sort of 3. Well, actually, there were kind of 2 big groups, you know, this idea of this pilot group of teachers to help us get going now, as opposed to trying to start out with all schools. So as we were putting the push and pull together, it was this idea of, if we try to get all schools and we try to get everybody and gather everybody, it creates a lot of complexity. It becomes very big very quickly, right? So the idea was, all right, well, let's start with a pilot group of teachers. It still means it's open to everybody, because I think we definitely heard this idea that it needs to be equal access and open. But doing that right from out of the gate didn't feel like a way we could make it work for city staff or resources or even us. So the idea is, like, we start with 3 teachers, maybe Layla, find someone from MA, because we talked about high school teachers being really important. And then I think Gina would be open, and Ravenswood as well. People who are a little more ready to go, essentially. Engage the superintendents to make sure they're aware. And then maybe we just do 1 project per teacher. It's really about just starting. I mean, I call it a pilot kind of on purpose. It's more about starting that engagement and just sort of learning quickly. All the while communicating that this will be open to the entire city, but like not delaying by trying to make this big event and action happen right out of the gate. Then keeping notes on how this will work for classes. So those 3 teachers, it's easier for Layla to work with the other 2 teachers as well. And they're all kind of just talking and going, oh, this is what I did, and this is what you did. So this idea of keeping notes and comparing notes, I think in a small pilot group is helpful. Because it would be a pilot group of just teachers as well. There's this thing that Layla kept mentioning. It's civic action, it's Assembly Bill 285. These new things that need to be taught in classrooms as well. Because we're not mucking around in this group, it allows teacher to teacher talking about, hey, how are we going to teach this new stuff we need to teach as well? Which I thought was a major advantage of starting with a pilot group of just teachers. And then we'll come to this in a minute, but the last bullet really says, as speakers for the kickoff and brainstorming event. So let me table that, because there's an idea of how we could kind of make that happen. So that's a sort of a way we started to solve this problem of equal access, but getting going now, because all schools is about equal access. And I think, I don't know if this is my language or yours, but to like avoid this monolithic, approach. We want to build in some flexibility and find what works for everybody. That's really important. But we need to do some, before we can involve all schools, we started to debate this in the room as I rewatched. It's like, don't we have a school here? And isn't that a Montessori school? And isn't this a Catholic school? So we got some groundwork to do before we can invite all schools anyway. Who would we work with and what are the schools? So separating that out and then starting to collect what teachers are doing. So there's work we could do in parallel around figuring out how to invite all schools into the mix. And then I won't read all this, but then there's this ongoing discussion we had about how do we make sure it keeps going? How do we make sure that people of all ages are input? So that category of ongoing is meant to be a little further afield, but not forgetting that we want this to be a sustainable program over time.
What does YAC stand for?
Oh, the Youth Advisory Commission, sorry, because we did have a big discussion about like, what can we do versus what the YAC can do. And you'll see it on the previous slides, but I think there's a pretty good role for that too. Yeah, well, right here, the advisory committee, not commission. So there's this idea that we pull in volunteers and that's either us as volunteers or other folks, maybe it's PTA, maybe there could be a lot of folks who would be interested in helping us make this happen. So we need to kind of crystallize what that might look like in the beginning. So the thinking is, all right, if we wanted to get a small group of volunteers together, then they could really help us design this kickoff event that would start to engage larger schools. So there's real action that can be taking place with a group of volunteers. They could start looking for resources that would support teachers, and that could be something that teachers tell us what they're kind of looking for. There's other pieces around, like coming up with a list of projects and things like that. So this idea that volunteers can start to help us gather some of the things that are going to make this sort of work as a broader program. And like I said, that could be us, that could be others. We don't need to limit it to just us. But then we separated it, we switched our hats and we said, all right, but as EQC members, we're a lot more limited, like we talked about last time. So what can we do? Well, as EQC members, we can track the work as part of the work plan to make sure like, oh, a teacher and a group of students worked on, I don't know, CAP 2 program 4, that kind of thing. So we can have that as part of our discussion as EQC members. That's definitely in our remit and we can bring it up as an agenda item, I'm assuming, and things like that. And then I think we have the flexibility to, using the CAP, we can maybe provide some, maybe we do a little subcommittee or whatever. We brainstorm some projects that we can feed to teachers and say, oh, well, this was the whole Bellhaven, building electrification thing, or maybe you can help us with fleet electrification so we can come up with creative ideas around projects that are CAP aligned, and then that turns into a resource for teachers to kind of choose from. These are only two. There might be a few other things we can do as an EQC, but it's more limited than the volunteer hat. And we don't want people to feel like, well, I signed up for this advisory commission, and now you're making me do all this extra stuff as well. Like I think we're all willing, but we need to build this for the future as well. People might not be as open to that. The Youth Advisory Committee, we will do a little research on the flexibility there, and maybe Rachel can talk a little bit about this in a minute, but providing input on the program and then trying to see if there's an opportunity for them to be involved. That's currently Parks and Rec, and it's driven by Sean and his team, I think mostly, right? So we just need to have some discussions. Although it's a great idea, we need to make sure we're not infringing on some of their current work. And then city staff, obviously just communicating resources there. And there may be other things that city staff can do, but we had a big discussion, of course, about limited resources and actually needing to implement the CAP and do all the work. So it becomes a little bit more volunteer driven, and we'll just need to consider how that will work. The last couple, I think I can go pretty quickly. I'm not going to read all this, but there's clearly a role for teachers. So we tried to, double click on this and say, all right, teachers can show other teachers why this is important. They can help design the programs. There's a little bit more of a lift in this model of we're more facilitating the connection to the city, as you saw in the previous role, but this really is an educational thing. So there's a little bit more of a role for teachers, students, and then potentially parents as well. We would just need to make it as easy as we could for them and be open to helping them do this stuff. So like we wouldn't design curriculum, right? But if teachers want to do that and they want to start talking about that, fantastic. So our role is a little more limited, but teachers is a little broader. Students also, I capture them in the very first bullet because I kind of love the idea. Let students take the lead. I think, Zach was saying this is with teacher support, the older students could visit other classrooms or do other things. So I think we need to build in this idea that students could actually drive a lot of this if it was flexible that way. And then, obviously discussions happen as a result of that, how would they feel more that they have more agency related to climate change? Because that's really one of the ultimate goals of this is we want students to feel like they have more control over their future because they're contributing to real solutions. So this idea of those first two bullets, I think first two or three are really important, which is as much as students can take the lead, then it prompts discussions about what they can or can't do and what us as adults have been doing or not been doing, good or bad. And then they're working on their own projects and they can do some of those at home. Those 3 bullets are a really big encapsulation of what I think a lot of this is about. And then parents and caretakers will potentially have a role as well. So like I said, I won't read all that. But Rachel, maybe the next slide. Oh, no, go back, sorry. Yeah, so again, this is more for reading and digesting. I don't think we need to be prescriptive at this stage about what this looks like. But I think it was helpful to categorize the kinds of projects, because this could be everything under the sun and it could be overwhelming. But if we put it into 2 buckets, there's the bucket of how to help students and other stakeholders, frankly, understand and fight climate change. So building understanding around CAB and the pieces of work and things like that, that's one big set of projects. And we talked about, going and talking about this at different schools and all kinds of stuff. So think of that as one category of work is how to understand what's going on with the climate. And then the second big one is really how can students primarily, but how can they support the specific climate action plan? So one is a little more broad on the left about climate change. And then the right-hand top is about specifically in our 6 goals and our sub-programs, what can be done, what kind of projects can be added in. And this is the part, again, referencing back where the EQC can do a little brainstorming and go, oh, this would be a great project for students, that kind of thing. So I think it's the right-hand side where as an EQC, we can play a bigger role in defining some of those projects. And then one kind of sub idea, and I can't remember who brought it up in our discussion. Maybe it was Zach or it was just this idea that embedded in a project, in each project, is there the opportunity for students to take the lead in some way? So in a typical classroom, it's like, here's your assignment, go do your assignment, get your grade, do all your things. That's great. That's a student kind of following the instructional model. But then what if we built in some ideas or help teachers think about where could students take the lead? Where could they organize something in the community? Where could they partner with a nonprofit and build things out? So we need to think about that a little bit more, but in both of these kind of project areas, some students could really step into leadership roles on activities as opposed to just completing an assignment. So it's just something to consider down on the bottom right. And and that's because you see those students all the time that are in 11th grade and you think, oh my gosh, they did so much more than I ever did in the 11th grade, and they started their own nonprofit and they're doing all this amazing things. We need to kind of tap into some of that as well, I think. And then the last slide, I think, is so what does this look like moving forward? So we thought maybe 5 simple steps might be the way to kind of push this to the next stage. One is the volunteers, as mentioned, would put together a kickoff meeting for teachers. So this idea that this is just to get the ball rolling.
So is that just the 3 teachers you were talking about earlier?
So this idea of getting a kickoff meeting where we can start to brainstorm what this really looks like. And then we can start to build out a toolkit based on this. So that could be project examples. If the teachers brainstorm like, well, we should teach these 3 things in curriculum. It's this idea to start to compile something for a bigger meeting, as Brian alluded to, which is the sort of the all city kind of meeting. So did I get that right? It's sort of the smaller group to then lead to the bigger I don't know, kickoff or whatever, launch, I think is the word I was thinking about. And then Rachel had some things in here about the city staff can put some of those resources on the website. So that kind of opens it up to people who can participate in classroom activities depending on our capacity. So I don't think as EQC members we're allowed to do that, but our peers can do that. And then I like the last one. I think this was one of Rachel's ads as well, is could we recommend ways to make meetings more open to student participation, and that
Are these meetings?
Yeah. So just like we're brainstorming, could we do something at the Bellhaven Community Campus, you know? We can have a similar discussion about what would make this more accessible for students. So going back to the original two kind of advice gathering pieces is, oh, well, this is what, I think Rachel was hoping to get advice on was how best to proceed with the Youth Advisory Commission. And maybe you can come back and talk about that, Rachel, and then hosting the EQC meetings to be more conducive as well. Those are two bits of advice. I think city staff is hoping to get advice on. That's it, right? That's the last one. Yeah, perfect. This was a much longer presentation until Rachel got hold of it, so she condensed it down, which is great. But hopefully that made a lot of sense. Why don't we take clarifying questions first?
Is the, how to proceed with the Youth Advisory Commission, one of those instances where we might have a joint meeting with another commission at the same time? So it's a way of conferring with them while conserving staff time.
The specific idea here is they've invited us to participate in their October 23rd meeting. And so it could be one of us, could be all of us. And so, yeah, getting a sense on what it would look like to be a part of that October 23rd meeting. And they have started out with just saying they wanted to have me present and share about sustainability in the city and talk about like green careers. I was like, and could we also maybe pitch an idea for how the Youth Advisory Committee could get involved? And Jeff had offered the idea of maybe they have a subcommittee on the Youth Advisory Committee that works on climate, and we don't know that, and we don't know, you know, if the EQC would kind of want us to go down that route. So who should present? Does October 23rd work, or do we need to go back another time? And what would be the content of the presentation and maybe the offer that we give back to the YAC on engaging with this?
So you probably discussed this last time, but can you remind me who the Youth Advisory Commission is and what their charter is?
Yeah, so they're not an official city commission. They are high school students that meet regularly with the staff liaison from the library and from community services. So there's one recreation specialist, Deshawn, and then there's a librarian, Ella, who, you know, kind of set the agendas and work with the students throughout the year. Their kind of keystone projects are like around events that bring students into the library. And they're also interested in kind of putting out information on social media and doing some kind of more emerging things there. But I think their biggest event has been like a flea market clothing swap. I think flea market clothing swap. And I think the group is probably twice this size. They made a presentation to city council 6 months ago or so.
So is it a Youth Advisory Commission that's intended to inform the city council on youth priorities, or?
No, it's more so to inform the library on how to bring teens into the library.
Okay.
And a little bit more on the social and events side. So part of the reason we went down the YAC path was, I know, what if it turned into more of what you're saying? What if it turned more into like an advisory group on like, this is how climate change is impacting our school? Combine it with that CAP plan idea we were just talking about, and it starts to become a really powerful advisory group. We just didn't feel comfortable going like, we're gonna take over the YAC. Like, that's not the goal, right? And we don't necessarily want to form our own either. So we're starting with this idea of, all right, let's see where the pressure points are, and there may be half of the group that will be interested, or will they have a subcommittee? And then if that all doesn't work, I think we can kind of go back to the drawing board about that.
And you said their ask to you was green jobs and what was the second category?
Learn more about the city's like climate action plan.
That's great.
And-
I love that they asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And the YAC is you composed of youth people or adults?
They're like
High
tenth
school
and
students.
11th grade. Well, I couldn't tell. They came in and they looked like about 10th or 11th graders, I guess.
Well, they were naming their schools and they're definitely all high schools.
Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, they
It makes
were,
it private and public.
yeah,
It's good.
and there were about 12, I think, 12 or 15.
And how did they form to begin with? What was the precipitating event?
There's a thing that goes out to the community and students are invited to apply. Did that happen like last May?
I believe so.
I remember
was
seeing
the
it in a lot of the city newsletters inviting.
So it was a city newsletter.
It just is hosted under Sean's group and under the Parks and Rec group. So it's taken on that, well, I guess that was the original charter, so it's got that flavor to it, but the idea is like, it doesn't have to have that flavor, it can have slightly different flavors. So.
It could expand. That seems like a very clear, what a great opportunity.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems like they do formally advise the Parks and Rec Commission.
What time is that? October 23rd meeting?
Oh, I didn't say it. 6 to 7:15. I believe. And then they also offer, 6:30 to 7:15, and they also offered October 9th if the 23rd is not amenable to this group.
So sorry, go ahead. Rachel.
No, we're still clarifying questions.
Yes, I was gonna ask any other clarifying questions before we move on to public comment, deeper discussion.
I was not clear on the last slide. I understood what the action, the proposed action is on the right one, but on that list of things, what is that exactly?
Hold on, let's make sure.
Yeah, that proposed those are proposed next steps for who to take.
I think we're focused on the blue box on the right.
I understand sorry, what is it?
Yeah. Sorry.
Decisions for today are the blue
Yeah.
box.
For our advisory part for this, yeah, that's the blue box, but to take the overall program forward, these are some of the next steps that would happen.
Okay, so that's the big context in which the blue box acts.
Not necessarily.
So tonight we want to toss around ideas for how to make ourselves more conducive to student engagement in our meetings.
I think, but also
Or is that
feedback,
more of a
but also
long-term?
feedback on the plan. I mean, the ideas in the plan, right? I mean, I think these are. This sort of implies that the rest of the stuff is written in stone, which it's not. It does incorporate all the feedback from last time, so hopefully we don't have to retread a lot of that. But if there are pieces of this that we want to adjust, so, okay. But to Eduardo's point, this is sort of, hey, if we're gonna take all these ideas and kind of march them forward, it's the traditional, like, oh, what are some next steps we should be thinking about working on? And if you feel like something up there is missing or it's not the right next step, we can obviously discuss that as well.
I think my first question would be, what does volunteers mean on there? I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm just trying to understand the big picture here.
I can provide some context, as we're kind of talking through it and understanding, what the role of the EQC is as an advisory body. It's, as we were thinking, it was, there's gray areas. It's actually pretty black and white, with the EQC not being able to do outreach and kind of represent the city in this sort of way and take on, activities where you're, developing all these materials and going into classrooms and working with students, mentoring them through different projects. And so, volunteers would be potentially EQC commissioners taking off the EQC hat. It'd be potentially the wider community of folks who are interested and are maybe engaged with Menlo Spark or 350 Silicon Valley or other community-based organizations that we work with. And so there's less kind of, agency or jurisdiction for the EQC to provide feedback on these proposed next steps. It's more context for this group to understand where the conversation went and what volunteers will be marching forward with in the coming weeks. And so I think if you're interested in engaging with this as a volunteer, it'd be good to connect with Chair Schmidt offline. But where the EQC does have realm and kind of ability and authority is on the blue box. that's where we're focused.
Yeah.
What makes that help?
Yeah, okay.
It's almost like as long as normal human residents in the city, like we can work on this, but we can't talk about it in EQC content.
Even
Like,
as abnormal.
as abnormal humans as well, which is probably more true sometimes, but
Does that constitute not letting the word EQC drop from our lip? Like literally, what is that in practice?
It would be totally appropriate if you're in a classroom to say, you know, I was talking to Jeff about this, like, I'm Jeff, I'm a proud parent, I work at Stanford, I'm a chair of the Environmental Quality Commission. It's totally fine.
it's kind of like what you do when you make public comment during city council, like, I'm this and this and this.
So.
But, you know, even though you know all these things about me, but I'm here as a private citizen, because what it means is like my personal view. I made some comment last night about Pullman and Ringwood Avenue, which is a little irritated. And even though
Very
I
irritating.
was very irritated, but I had to say like, you know, hey, I play these roles, but this is my personal view, please don't do X. You know, now that was in no way representative of the city's view or, you know, so yeah, you have, just like city council, you have to take that hat off so people don't misconstrue that you're speaking on behalf of the EQC or the city. And it feels like it's technicality, but I think it's really important because honestly, you know, the hats are blurry, and if you don't say it, people might think you're speaking on behalf of the EQC.
I've never seen a blurry hat.
Yeah, it's true. It's good an element to.
One other quick question to clarify, the staff has a role in this, and so I just checking in, is that in the work plan enough that the staff can fit it in? Because it falls under the fact of that we're required to do community engagement, it's all.
Yeah, so these pieces have been vetted upwards, and they would be appropriate. I think typically the city doesn't like amplify, you know, messages on social media unless it's with like an organization that we're clearly partnered with, like through a contract or an MOU. And so this was where it got a little gray as well. But we would be able to, just because there's so much alignment with our climate action plan.
Yeah, because honestly, you know, a big part of this is how do students help us work on the climate action plan? Whether they're solving a real problem or whether they're just doing a theoretical, here's how I would, you know, our ocean example of like, here's how I'd clean up the ocean, you know, so it is a way to do awareness building with students that there's a climate action plan, there's an EQC, there's like work going on. It is a version of outreach, I think.
And it isn't, on social media, it isn't specific to the MPCSD. It's general programs that the city's doing with all students, it applies to all students. So it's not the problem in terms of amplifying on social media because it's a city.
And the only clarifying difference is, yeah, we would start with a smaller group to kind of get the ball rolling as volunteers. Maybe we engage like a PTA, we engage Menlo Spark, sorry, put Brian on the spot. We engage Menlo Spark, we can engage other people to kind of get the ball rolling. And then there becomes this more formal, like city, I don't even know what to call it. I'm just still keep calling it launch. This open to everyone. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we learned. We can delay that a little bit, but we don't want to lose the momentum we have today with Ms. Ward and some of the other folks to sort of, you know, get at least 3 schools going. We may have capacity for a little bit more. I mean, depending on who picks it up and who wants to volunteer.
I mean, I think this is kind of thing that Sacred Heart School would pick up in a heartbeat because I know they're forward on climate.
Yeah.
Are we in discussion?
I was gonna say, we're probably creeping into discussion. Should we do public comment real quick? Oh, sorry, yeah, it's
Well,
fine.
I'll do it.
Can we open it for public comment?
Yeah, if there's any public comment in the room, we have placards on the ledge over there. If you're online, you can hit the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or next to your name. If you're calling in from the landline, you can press *9 and we'll be able to unmute you. We don't have any public comment in the room. It doesn't look like we have any online. One last call online or by phone for public comment. Okay, return the meeting to.
Should we continue our discussion? All right, so why don't we open it up for formal discussion? That's quite fine. Yeah, and part of that is, this was just an attempt to categorize and structure a far-ranging brainstorming last time, so, I mean, feedback on that, feedback on how does this feel? Does it feel like, since the very first discussion the subcommittee had, is this moving the ball forward? I mean, just curious on a lot of different fronts.
Well, I'm appreciating the clarity about what is the role of a volunteer versus an EQC member and city staff. So thank you for taking the time to figure that out, bring that back to us. I guess I'm mostly interested in focusing our part of the conversation on what is the EQC going to do? And I was excited to see that city staff was willing to put together some communications for students and parents and teachers. And I think that would be useful for the whole community, because I think there's some more work to do around just climate action plan education. So that seems like a nice win-win. It touches the schools, but also everybody else in it.
I feel much more comfortable about the definition put around both the mission and the role of the EQC. I think we'd all love to be deeply involved in everything we do, so it was nice of you to roll it back. And the outline of the specific, let the ideas to be tossed around struck me as a wonderful way to add value to the school and to the program without committing to any specific like building curriculum. So it felt more lightweight.
But I think that's an important distinction, right? So in this room, I mean, that's a great, we can tee that up as a future topic on agendas, and it aligns with the work of doing the climate action plan, because it's a version of outreach in this room context, right? I think to the point about sort of what happens next, I've been thinking about like, how does this move forward? As EQC members in this room, there's a couple of things we can do that are practical to help us move forward. The big lift's going to be the outside volunteer work and sitting with the folks who might be interested, is just sort of this final oomph of saying, all right, there's a core working group of us who are taking our EQC hats off, and there's no pressure to do that, right? Because you'll still have a role in this room. But to those who want to take their hats off as volunteers and work with some of the teachers and work with potentially the PTAs and the nonprofits, I think the volunteer role will be larger in the beginning until we can get traction with the schools and with the students. And then I think that volunteer role, I think of it as like passing the potato, good Lord, passing the bag and sort of saying, all right, we're going to take this and we're going to fill the bag up. And we're going to do a little bit of work as volunteers, but then we're going to pass that bag to the schools and teachers because they're excited because this is about education. So I don't think it's you're forever committed as a volunteer to have this big heavy bag that you have to carry on your back, right? Full of potatoes, apparently. But yeah, that's the sort of thinking about how this might start and shift over time.
So it sounds like there's opportunities for people in this room or listening to this recording later
Yep.
to reach out to you. Your email's on the website if they want to be involved,
Yeah.
or if we want to be involved.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be point person. I mean, I think sorry, I'm not gonna put you guys on the spot, but like we have a subcommittee as well who may want to stay involved. And so, yeah, there's an opportunity to get involved. I think I'll definitely want to carry this forward in my non-EQC hat to just get it going. It'll be really similar to Nancy and me and Tom and everybody doing community collaborative where, we'll just try to meet regularly. We'll try to get some structure going. We'll keep Rachel engaged in making sure we're doing that. So yeah, it'll turn into a little bit of what we've done before.
Yeah,
I think.
that makes sense.
Yeah. That helps.
And the YAC meeting.
And then the YAC meeting, yeah, the YAC meeting that's us though officially, right? We
Yes.
talk to them as EQC members.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can attend on the 23rd. I don't know if you're looking
6:30
for.
to 7:15. Yeah.
Can do it too.
Okay. I cannot, so, but. Awesome.
Anyone else want to join?
That has a little hard.
Where's it going to be?
Get back to you.
Yeah, if you could just send out a calendar.
Yeah. I assume it's here,
I said it's October, right?
23rd.
I love the idea that they're willing to, well, that they're curious about what's happening sustainability wise, and we can support them in expanding their mission and having their involvement with us. That would be great.
I can join too.
Awesome.
I can do it too.
As a backup, it's a hard night for me, but we don't want to fail to show.
No, that's perfect. Then we don't have a quorum, which just makes it easy.
So I think also you already know this, but just to be clear about advising as well, is like, it'll probably be a couple of conversations, like we'll show up as many of us who want to attend. That'll be a kickoff conversation. I'm sure there'll be some backroom negotiations and other conversations that Rachel can have with that group. So it'll take a little while to get I still love saying it's the yak going. But I feel like there's a good chance that happens. And then if it doesn't happen, I was thinking about this, is we probably need to keep the subcommittee going for a little bit, just because if we don't get the yak, then what do we do? So it doesn't remain a purely volunteer thing. Because having that kind of a yak-like structure, I think is really valuable. It creates a more natural liaison point with the city than just us as volunteers.
Yeah.
So
Seems like great opportunity.
it's a future discussion. Maybe we have our own yak if that yak doesn't want to, do this.
What was the other agenda item for the blue box?
Any other ideas or considerations for making meetings more conducive to student engagement? And that might come later. Part of what I was thinking was, in the slides, I was seeing having a student liaison or classroom liaison come to the meetings, and this time, location, maybe the topics of today wouldn't have been interesting to a student. And so how do we do that? But maybe it's something we think about as the plan makes a little more progress. And we actually identify some of the student liaisons and understand what their needs are.
Yep.
We don't need to have a.
That seems great.
It's tough to imagine that an evening on a night would be super hard. I mean, it's not noon on Tuesday. And it may be that the topics that we discussed, deeply boring or nerdy topics, are perfect because students need to understand that this work happens at a very boring level. And I wonder if there are students who would find that sort of a grown-up experience to be a growth opportunity. So I don't know if we need to pitch it down necessarily, not that you were saying that.
Yeah.
Well, there could be, I love that you said that, because there could be sort of we always make sure the student thing is first on the agenda, and then if they want to escape, but then the ones who want to stay, like there's ways. I think this is what Rachel's looking for, is there's ways we can adjust our workflow in slight ways that make it conducive for the get me in, get me out, or the, hey, I'd like to stay for the whole thing and say.
Actually, we might do that in general for our loyal following.
Yeah, that's true. Next steps. Sorry, the one clarifying kind of thing I was curious about was, I think we take this plan, assuming everybody feels okay with this, because we did talk about making a motion on this one.
We don't have to at this, yeah.
Well, but when you were thinking we'd make a motion, what would the motion be? Would it be to adopt this as I was a little confused about what the motion might or might not be.
It was gonna be naming the folks who are gonna join the YAC meeting, and if there are any kind of ideas for meetings, but I don't think.
Yeah.
We have anything there.
It's turned out, and it's not really a formal thing, right? You can make it.
Turned out to be friendlier.
Yeah, good. And then I think, but then on the parallel path, there's let's construct the bulk of this. Let's keep kind of clicking down into what the plan looks like. And if anybody wants to be part of that discussion, I think we need to follow up with Layla. I think we need to do some outreach to the other schools. Sorry, I'm looking over at you guys like you're meant to do. You don't have to do that because it's a subcommittee thing, but if there are people who want to join that work, I promise it will be time bound and relatively short. But we'll just set up a meeting, kind of like we did with Tom. We'll just set up a meeting and check in and start to advance the kind of project plan part of this. I think that's probably the way to do it. And then we'll obviously do that in lockstep with you.
That sounds perfect. And the three of us will update after the YAC meeting.
I just wanted to acknowledge Chair Schmidt's work on this. He did a lion's share of it, and it's really great work, and it's really important work to engage the students. So thank you, Chair Schmidt.
Also, I'm not certain as a commission that we were going to ever land on ways to do outreach. theory we were, but there's a lot to juggle. So thank you for making sure we got there.
Yeah, we'll get there. Thank you for saying that. We'll get there. I mean, I think this has been incredibly valuable to just think through this and clarify this. I mean, Rachel did a lot of work in taking a lot of our thoughts and paring it down into what we are allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. So it really is a team. I mean, I know I do the slides, but it's a team effort to take the ideas, synthesize them, vet them, make sure we move it forward. So appreciate that.
Very good job.
So we keep the subcommittee going for the time being?
We can, yeah, we have until
Maybe they-
October.
Okay.
Probably just as a safety net kind of a thing, just to
Yeah.
make sure, because we're still in the
Well, it'd
somewhat.
be nice to report out on the yak thing, maybe in November.
Yeah.
Or there's no meeting in November, but maybe December. And
There's
then,
no-
It's holiday.
Do we want to reschedule and try to find a different night?
I would be fine with that. We could, agendize that at our October meeting. Discussing November.
Good. All right, so, well, for the sake of getting us out here at a relatively decent hour, unless there's any other discussion on that one, we can maybe move forward. Okay, all right, thanks, everybody. D5, consider appointing additional commissioners to the EQC ad hoc subcommittees. Ms. Lunder, could you please give us a little background on this?
Sure, so we are now gonna be including the work plan in every agenda packet. And so that's just kind of a heads up, and as it's going to council on September 24th. We did not include in that version kind of like the roster and the time for each of the subcommittees. And so, periodically, we may want to add people to subcommittees or drop people off of them or change the duration. And so we have a placeholder today. If there's anyone who wants to hop on a subcommittee, hop off, or, discuss what that looks like in the work plan further. And I think there's one specific ask around adding someone to the impact of plastics on the environment ad hoc subcommittee. And if there's others, we could go into discussion around that. I suppose we should do clarifying questions and then public comment.
Yeah, can we, so the goal is, I think is, Ms. Lunder said, to make sure we've got the subcommittees properly kind of fleshed out and give people a chance to move things around. So any clarifying questions we need to see about that?
So we project out what it is kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
and thank you for adding the work plan into the agenda packets.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know other commissions do add kind of like upcoming topics as a teaser, so it works. Okay. Is this for, and
Thank you.
let's see. So the student engagement ad hoc subcommittee. This one I think is an old one. Sorry, I might have an old version of. Okay, Heritage Tree Ordinance Admin Guidelines Ad hoc Subcommittee. Distribute Energy Resources Ad hoc Subcommittee. Impact of Plastics on the Environment Ad hoc Subcommittee. Climate Change Resilience and Adaptation Ad hoc Subcommittee. Transportation. And that's our last one.
So I,
Go for it. Oh, clarifying questions.
yeah, it's not clarified. I'm ready to discuss.
I have a clarifying question. Impact of plastics on the environment subcommittee. Scope, research and present recommendations on programs and policies to prevent stormwater pollution prevention. I think we're pro stormwater pollution prevention. I'm just calling out to clarifying a typo.
Oh, thank you. To
No
prevent-
problem.
Great.
It's like the walk for cancer. We're against cancer.
We're walking for it. Yeah. Thank you.
And just to clarify, question. This can change again in real time, right?
So we'll be able to change, typo sort of things, adding commissioners, amending the duration. And then as we kind of look at the schedule, we can change when there's, kind of an emergency, someone can't make the presentation, or we don't have the information ready, like what happened with the Heritage Tree Ordinance admin guidelines. But if we start to kind of move too far from this calendar, it gets into the territory of going back to city council for approval.
Could you go back down as well? I think all I'm trying to say in a more delicate way than I probably should is, so I think October is okay, but at least from on a couple of mine, but then the one in March, I won't be in the EQC for November. So I'm assuming that we can shuffle that around quickly. Like,
Yeah,
it won't change that's a bit of a.
And we could just take the action to remove you today so other folks can see
That's
the
what I
playing
was
field
kind of
better.
asking is
Yeah.
like, not that I don't want to do the work, but there's a couple of October where I feel like it can round it out successfully and potentially either hand it off or whatever, but the one in March might be. And we've got a little work to do with the county.
I'll volunteer to take your seat.
Well, let's do that in discussion.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just to be clear, what's going to city council is the topics.
Mhm.
So the page that has the nice blue and white. And then the part about the ad hoc subcommittees is something that we have more control over. It doesn't have to go back to city council. Correct. Okay. Great.
Yeah,
It's still gonna be presented on the 24th to city council, but it'll just have the name of the subcommittee and the scope.
Great.
That makes sense.
Let's discuss.
let's open up for public comment and then we can discuss. Any, right? Are we?
Yeah,
good?
let's open it for public comment. If there's any
Public comment.
comment in the room, there's cards over there. If you're online, you can press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or next to your name. If you're joining by phone, you can press *9 and we will be able to unmute you. There's no public comment in the room and there's no public comment online, so I return the meeting to you.
Fantastic. So why don't we open it up for discussion?
So you deleted one about public communication and I remember we had a conversation about it. I don't know what we decided because I originally suggested that we had one to talk about how do we communicate more effectively with our community, and we also talked about potentially collaborating with other commissions to understand how collectively all of our commissions engage with the public.
I remember
Become community education and engagement.
Yeah, but she just deleted that. I don't remember, and it didn't have anybody assigned to it, and I don't know what happened to it.
Okay, I thought that was a legacy one, because I remember from a previous conversation, we had a lot of back and forth on it.
Yeah.
Did this look like-
A lot of back and forth, but I don't remember what we.
This
Was this the final iteration? I was gonna check what actually is going to council this.
It's a little different. I'm glad Frank pulled it out. So this was, I think I was the instigator of this idea. And it was, because if you read the scope, it's not about outreach for the EQC, if you remember this part of the discussion. I think a lot of our city commissions struggle with outreach.
Exactly.
So it's this idea of, could we be the instigators of a new commission forming at the city level?
That's right.
To basically say, let's have a group of citizens who can assist with community engagement and outreach across every commission. So we can like outsource some of our stuff to this commission.
Yes.
And I think Rachel was gonna go back and have a chat with Judy about what would it take to establish a new commission.
That's
And
right.
So this one's less about the EQC and more about creating an extra resource at the city level where we could offload some of this. So and that's probably why we didn't have.
Yeah.
There used to be one more commission. We're a commission down from history, right?
Which I remember you saying last time, I don't know what the commission was, but like, this is just this idea of the number of commissions does fluctuate. I looked at, as boring as it sounds, like the city history of this kind of stuff, and I think they've had it like 15 at one point. I mean, it was a crazy number, so. So the ability to do it exists. It's just this question of, will we be comfortable going like, oh, here's this outreach commission. Maybe it's full of marketing people, like, that'd be great. I mean.
As long as they have the power to act.
Right, so there's some of that kind of element to it.
And just a correction, I looked at what the clerk, how she packaged up the work plans, and she did not include our calendar. Just the first
Just
page
that very
of
top level.
the goals and the plan history, which I think is actually helpful for us in terms of flexibility.
So here's a concept as well, and sorry, give me 2 seconds. Here's a concept as well that I think will be interesting. There's enough legacy people, so we got 2 rolling off and 3 remaining on city council. The 3 who are remaining understand the outreach challenge. I think they brought it up in various city council meetings. I mean, I clearly understand it as well. I think our 5th will kind of quickly understand it. So I feel like the time is pretty right for having this, that they've all recognized that one of the big challenges that all the commissions have is outreach. So it feels like the time is right to tee this up as an opportunity to potentially, so, because it goes to city staff right now. Everything is one more burden on city staff. So if this is packaged the right way, I think you might have a fairly receptive council to the idea. Just has to be teed up the right way. So sorry, time is ripe, maybe is
Yeah.
what I was trying to.
So what is the mechanism for impaneling a new commission?
I think Rachel was gonna figure that out.
Is there a mechanism?
And is there a role for the EQC?
Yeah, I
Should
don't
we
think
be-
there is. I mean, I think that's why it's not on our list.
Well, we can be we can be the ones who kind of bring it forward and say like, we've got so much outreach we need to do. Like somebody's got to present it.
Sure, but I don't know that we need to have a subcommittee to do that.
Oh, yeah.
But it can even
That's
be
why I think
a
Rachel
vote
took it
today.
off.
If that's helpful. If we're advising city council, we say we would like to see the city do this, we could.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point, though. We don't necessarily need a subcommittee to
Yeah.
decide. If we like the idea. And we think that the EQC could be the instigators to say, we really need some help doing outreach.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't have to be a subcommittee. It's just like, maybe Rachel can just bring it up. I don't know. How does?
Yeah, I haven't brought it up, yet, so.
So maybe
I'll do
this
that.
is something you work with Judy and maybe bring
Yeah,
back to us and then maybe we have a motion, take an action on this and then it can go to city council at some point.
So so if we're hearing it correctly, then it doesn't become a subcommittee, it becomes an
New
agenda item.
commission.
And it's an agenda item for October. So
Yeah, we call it outreach and engagement. I mean, one of the things that I've heard other commissioners is people don't engage until after the fact. Like when something's changed, then the whole, everything blows up.
Yeah.
Right, and it's like, well, how can we prevent that? We get people aware and engaged before a decision's made, so that once a decision's made, then it doesn't get sidelined and deferred. And it happens
Like
across
this,
the
right?
board, yeah, it's just like, it seems like every decision, because I've been frustrated seeing some, decisions being made and then turned. And so it's like, well, I don't think that's unique to EQC. I think every commission does.
but I mean, I can say the joy of what I've been going through the last 6 months is it's happened like downtown development is covered in city council. There's some people who didn't like it. I got like 6 phone calls, had 4 coffee meetings, like and we're 20 years away from, not 20 years away. We're a long time away from putting up a building in downtown. So, but it's this pattern of like, you never talk to me as a downtown business owner.
Right.
So I think the pattern, to your point, the pattern is continuing.
Right.
And it's not commission based. It's like, we have a staff that struggles with doing the work and the extra burden of outreach on top of it.
Yeah.
The only other thought that I had, and this is something we can consider, Rachel, is could it be outreach and volunteerism? And I know those are 2 different things, but like, it's something we should probably just, as we add this to the agenda and think about, outreach is one part of the challenge, but then if we're gonna do a new commission, should we shoot for the moon and go like, let's make it about outreach and let's make it about getting more people to volunteer? So that's just another debate point, I think. Outreach is the big need, but volunteerism is something I think we need to.
So I want to reinforce engagement. It's one thing to just send out an email blast or post on the website. We need to get people engaged.
Yeah, which is where I think that volunteer and engagement is kind of my same
Okay, yeah.
concept, yeah.
We need to hear from Complete Streets.
Yeah.
Who is it who's removing parking places, doing stuff where citizens
Yeah.
really complain?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear from that commission. It's like
So
that's their
Sally
engagement.
Soul is the head of that, and she will talk about.
She will want that, yeah, immediately. I mean, we were at the meeting last night and like just the outreach, 20 years of outreach.
Which meeting? Sorry.
There was a county, Coleman Avenue Ringwood, stuff at the county level and, you know, they've been discussing it for 20 years and, you know, doing 15 years of outreach. So not that this would solve that, but
Yeah.
yeah, Complete Streets, I think we both know Sally, well, no, like they would totally
They'd be
appreciate help with that stuff.
So there are two, at least from, just to clarify what we're talking about. It's 100% agreeing with everything we said, and it seems to me it's an intrinsic problem at all levels. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
we can look at the California legislature.
Sure, yeah.
That
It's not
happens.
just.
Right.
All right.
There are at least two different ways for me to hear this notion of another commission. One is a commission that does the outreach, another one is a commission that provides the infrastructure so that we are more effective at doing the outreach.
But we can't do outreach as an EQC, so that's the tricky part of all this, right? I think it's why we
Can
should,
we do the outreach as a?
because we're advisory, so to Nancy's point. So we would have to talk about this when we agendize this. We would have to talk about it.
I got
as-
it.
Because planning's not advisory, planning is decision making. So what does that look like? What's our flexibility? I don't think it could be advisory because that's just one more group advising city staff to do the same work they're struggling to do. So I think it has to take on some different flavor than advisory. Whatever that might be. Okay.
Thank you for researching that for us, Rachel.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully it's just a chat with Judy, right? Hopefully.
Yes, it's pretty easy to chat. to do.
Yeah.
I had something on a different topic related to this agenda item.
Sure.
If
Yeah,
we're ready.
no, I think we're in open discussion. We just started talking about that one, but it's about the whole subcommittee structure.
So there are two things I wanted to call out. So one is related to our topics. So for October, we have the Heritage Tree Ordinance Subcommittee. And under the right-hand section, what our EQC role is, it says informational/no action. And I would like that to change to provide feedback to staff. Because if we're not, if it's just informational to the EQC, I would say have Jillian or Rachel come and give the update to us, and we don't have any action to take. We don't need to have the subcommittee. We don't need to review the admin guidelines. But we currently have a subcommittee. And I think we're assuming we're going to do some work. And we would like that work to maybe result in something. So if everyone is amenable to that, I would like it to be a little bit more action oriented.
Could I just have, before you go to second, could I just sort of add a thought to that, which is sort of and we don't have to do this, so just to be clear, but I find it really valuable talking to Bob and Shannon and Jackie in D5. They were our original group of advisors.
Yeah.
I want to spend some time with JP at Canopy and you're, I want to talk to Canopy a little bit, talk to some other residents. So I think us gathering inputs as well for people who are really in,
What's your point though? Because we've already been doing that. We've been, I mean, I feel like the policy team of the subcommittee, you know, the working group that we've had, the policy team has been actively talking with community members, and like, at least for me, I've been keeping an ongoing list of community members who feel strongly about trees and
right, yeah, also.
so encouraging all of them to come and hear.
Or less about that and more about, can that be incorporated in with the subcommittee's action? Sorry, it's sort of like representing resident voice.
Yeah, for sure. I think absolutely.
Whatever
But I
you
guess
call it.
my point is, I want to make sure that we can take some action as a commission based on the work of the subcommittee, which includes the three of us, and I think can extend beyond that too.
What do you mean
community members.
after the guidelines are?
The guidelines will be shared.
Oh,
I
I
think
see.
we will want to discuss, we'll
Yep.
want to hear from Jillian. I think we'll want to also talk with community members
Yes,
who are already actively engaged.
Right.
And I think that would come back and we'd say, okay, based on everything we've learned, either we're supportive of this,
Exactly.
or we'd like to make X, we'd like to recommend X and Y changes. But as I understand it, that work isn't to go to city council. Staff gets to make that call. So I think the opportunity for us is to potentially get feedback to staff.
Yes.
So that's
that
the
makes
thing I'm
sense.
asking for.
Yes.
yeah, and I was layering in the, like, let's make sure we built in the talking to residents to represent
Yeah,
their voice.
I had assumed that that was the case.
Modifying the scope of that particular subcommittee.
No, it's for me with the agenda, if I'm being super, my brain. On page 61 of the agenda packet today, under October 2024, in this line item, it says informational, no action. I would say informational / provide feedback to staff.
Yeah,
That would be my, if we were making a motion, that would,
Second that.
okay, great.
we have a motion from Commissioner Headley and a second from Vice Chair McKenna to update the EQC role to informational provide feedback to staff for October 2024. Recommend updates to Heritage Tree Ordinance admin guidelines.
Yes,
All in favor? So moved. Thank you.
I had another thing.
Yes.
I'd like to be on the plastics subcommittee.
All in favor?
Do you want to second that one?
Do we have to? Can't you just
I'll
volunteer?
second.
I don't know if we have to, do you formally do it every time?
As well.
Yeah,
I think
might as
it's
well.
both.
Yeah, is there anyone else who wants to be added? Because we could do it in one fell motion.
I'd like to step in and assist on resilience if Chair Schmidt.
I think if I'm able
no
to,
longer available.
I just felt weird that people in city council would see like March and then they're gonna go, but wait, what? how-
They won't see that.
Oh, they won't see
Yeah.
that. Oh, okay, but still, I think
Yeah.
having Commissioner Hill like be part of that. So there can be a smooth handoff.
Yeah, I think that will be good.
Yeah,
Any place where it's either only you or only you and one person,
right.
it would be nice to start that transition now.
That's exactly what I was thinking, yeah.
Are there any other places that are,
If we wrap up the admin guidelines of trees, I don't think that's necessary. And then if we wrap up the other one, which was, what was it? Oh, the student engagement stuff. Because I think my role as an EQC person, like we could button that up at an EQC level, but I'll still be able to do the volunteer thing.
great,
Okay, so we are looking for a motion. Do you want to make a motion?
yeah, I'll make a motion. So to add Commissioner Headley to the plastics subcommittee and Commissioner Hill to the resilience subcommittee.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Headley and a second from Commissioner Kisley. Kisley. I don't know.
We should find a commissioner.
To add Commissioner Headley to the plastic, impact of plastics on the environment ad hoc subcommittee and add Commissioner Hill to the climate change resilience and adaptation ad hoc subcommittee. All in favor? Great, so moved. I'll make those updates and you'll see that reflected in the work plan in the next agenda pack.
So we're looking for adjustments or on this thing, right?
If there's anything else you notice, but we have made a motion, so
Okay.
we're all set.
So just to, you mentioned, or somebody mentioned, I think it was you, that I think it was Ori, that in the December report, we were talking about solar and battery storage. There was going to be a report on our compliance with Cal app.
Oh, yeah.
Is it solar app? Can we spell it out there, or does that need to be?
I will spell it out there because staff will do that
Yeah,
presentation.
right.
Thank you.
What
We
is
don't-
that one? Compliance with what?
This is the, we're supposed, all the cities, are supposed to be, supporting, online expedite, permitting for solar and, batteries by this month, by September. So it's, in theory, we're supporting it.
Yeah, and I'll have that information and provide feedback to staff because there might be opportunities to share how we can improve our website or something.
Also, by the way, I'm going to be in Spain at for that day. So I'm not going to be able to, I'm going to be able to listen, but I'm going to be
I
able
think
to.
there are two other of us on that.
Yeah, there are two of them, so it should be okay.
We can always maybe switch with
If
January.
you can change it to another day, that would be better for me, but
Would the plastics folks be ready in December? Maybe that's for the November meeting. Are you here in November?
November, there's no meeting, right? Because of,
If
We're
we're
gonna
gonna create one,
oh, we're gonna grade
the
one.
magic one out of the calendar.
I don't know.
We got
Seems a bit tricky.
October.
It's already,
Yeah.
Pretty quick.
Okay, well, we can figure it out.
yeah, it seems tight to me.
I feel like it'd be really important to have you there, but we
Yeah.
can always find it.
And you can present it or one of them.
Is it just two of us on that committee?
No, there's you, me, and who's the other one?
Is anybody? Do you have the list?
You. You're the third one.
Commissioner Hill.
I forgot that that was.
That's for December.
I'm there anyway.
Can you help us understand how we can participate remotely? Like if we need to be traveling for business or personal, like under what circumstances can we participate?
Dude, it's kind of bizarre. You have, so I went through this, either you have to be sick, or if you're not sick, you have to be in a location that is publicly accessible. So I was down in Southern California in a house. And I would have had to like open up the house to let anybody who happened to want to come in. And it's a gated community and I couldn't do that. So I had to just listen. I couldn't speak. It was kind
Yeah.
of strange.
Yeah,
So
And
what
we
Mike
need
is,
to post the address on the agenda. So Spain would be fine. We would post the address on the agenda. We would send you with a printed copy of the agenda that you could post on your door.
like
Um,
anyone's gonna show up.
Yeah, but if you were gonna be in the airport, that wouldn't fly because you would need a ticket to enter the airport.
I see. So it's
Yeah. With the 9 hour time zone difference, I don't know how this is going to actually fly.
So let's offline.
Yeah, let's see where we can, I mean, another month would be better.
Yeah, we don't have to, turn this over to the schedule.
Yeah.
That can be done through the will of the chair.
Great.
So I had one more. It's actually just a question, and so I don't want to keep us for another 45 minutes figuring it out. James's presentation that we just heard. So this idea of benchmarking, this phased approach, benchmarking, then having a period of non-enforcement, no fines, and then moving into, this idea of, it'll be in full force in 2020, whatever. Does that sit with the subcommittee? I want to be careful because I'm not prescribing this as imposing it, but I think John had already kind of teed this up as one part of this. So do we want to potentially start to formalize that, add it to the work plan? Like what could that start to look like? Because I think a lot of us felt pretty good about what James just presented. And like, where does that sit?
But the other thing that he said was the way small communities should engage is to try to support state level initiatives.
But
And the other thing I heard was that city staff made a recommendation to city council a couple of weeks ago. City council made a decision, gave direction to staff. So I'm wondering if that's already with you all to take action. And I don't know if you need support from us on what to do next, but that was how I'm
So
interpreting.
what was the guidance the city council gave to staff on this?
Yeah, I can share that. So the guidance and from my perspective, this fits into the reach code conversation, because we wouldn't have necessarily just a reporting thing without kind of the trigger that he was talking about with the codes. They go hand in hand. So the direction from city council on August 27th was to bring back code amendments to the state building codes at the time of adopting the next code cycle. So we'll be looking in October 2025 to have the city council adopt the full California Building Standards Code along with any amendments that support increased energy efficiency and energy performance. And so kind of backtracking, we're looking at our timeline of, oh, we need to start doing community engagement soon on that topic, because we want to have everything packaged up and ready for the city council to adopt. But the building standards, and then January 1, our builders and residents know, they have the California building standards and they have the Menlo Park specific regs.
Is there something that exists or that is anticipated to exist at the state level with respect to performance management as opposed to building?
It's about BPS specifically?
Well, I think that's what you were talking about. If we have our whole stock, right? So I think the point that he made, and I think Brian also alluded to, is, yes, we can say for all new construction, you need to do this, but for the next 20 years, we're gonna have a lot of existing construction.
I think Rachel was my understanding is that there was the first thing you were talking about, we need to do adopt the California Energy Code plus. But there were a couple of other things I think that city council kind of asked you guys to look at. And I feel like you didn't get a chance to finish saying what you were gonna say about city council direction.
Oh, so they specifically asked us to look at, all building types and new and existing buildings. So options for all of them, at that time. And they also asked us to bring forward, a code amendment for this code cycle, where it's relatively small in scope, where if you're replacing your electrical panel at home, you have to size it to, prepare for the future electrification of all your appliances. And you also have to wire and have an outlet for the future installation of a heat pump water heater. So that was one thing that I'm moving forward with now. And then the second piece is going through this community engagement process and coming up with ordinances across building types and construction types that can be adopted with the 2025 code cycle. And then they approved that large kind of the rest of the scope of the climate action plan. And so have any of those activities we can, engage in.
Yeah, so that's a huge opportunity.
I'm sorry, so this is directive from the council to staff. And the actions that you would take would be in what time frame? I'm trying to understand how this relates to the ad hoc subcommittee that we're doing, because some of the things that would be on that list are probably overlapping with what you're being told.
Yeah, so the time frame that we'd probably come back to the EQC with different policy options and getting, recommendations from the EQC or advice from the EQC would probably be summer next year. Summer 2025, maybe spring 2025.
So we're aligning with the Title 24, January 2026. Okay. And so, I mean, based on what I'm hearing, I think that as a subcommittee, my first reaction would be, we would need to talk with you, understand more of what you're saying, because things like how to upgrade the panel and adding battery and stuff like that were things that were in my mental list. So maybe it's an additional reason to move that subcommittee a bit further out so that we can have more conversations.
That's helpful to hear, because I was thinking it was more around like outreach programs, like talking about like this is a program that installs solar and we staff can explore that more.
Maybe a combination, but that in particular, I mean, I was thinking also about things like, how we can encourage people to install, for example, this last week, there were new products on 200 amp panels that make it really easy to add battery to, right? So making that more known, so people are more aware about that.
But I want to come back and make sure I understood as well, because I was in that meeting and the building standards and the performance standards are kind of two different things, but let me go back to the simplest version of this question in my brain is like, are we gonna do anything with what James said? And is that encompassed, and if so, where does it live? Is that encompassed in with what you were charged with? Or does it sit in the subcommittee? So like, are we gonna do something with it? Is it already happening? Would it sit with your work? Would it sit with the subcommittee? I'm just trying to, parse that out, because I don't know the building standards well enough to know if they align with what we should do for performance stations.
Just to make sure we're on the same page, I mean, and I think that John knows this better than most of us, but my understanding is that the way that the energy code is put together is there is a prescriptive and then there is the performance model.
Okay,
And that is separate from separate but related to what John was what the presentation was about. Because the presentation was about using the performance, but on existing buildings. And the energy code discussion is about using the performance, but in new buildings,
on new builds, okay.
right? So it's the same term, but it's different spaces. That matches your understanding about what's going on?
It's just that, I don't know, do we want to have this?
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
I don't think it makes sense for this item. Performance means two different things. Performance in the energy code is the ability to get into the energy modeling software, meet a certain target set by the state or set by the jurisdiction you're in. And then, performance as far as, the building performance standards would be a different scale, a different metric. And we would be requiring kind of reporting until they reach that level of performance. And so it's a little outside the code, but we can get into the weeds later on that one. I think as far as where that lives, the council, by adopting the climate action plan 2025-2030 scope of work, has given us the ability to explore that and make a specific policy recommendation to them. And so my thinking is it would go kind of hand in hand with the REACH code, and we would kind of discuss all those policies at once, make a recommendation, and I'd bring it to city council for them to choose what policies they want to adopt.
Okay, I think that answered my question, because the heart of my question wasn't debating. It was sort of, where would that, I think we all like.
It was with staff.
It would live with
yeah,
staff
yeah,
as part of the REACH code discussion.
Yeah, so now we have the ability to move forward and explore.
And you don't need
which is great.
to, because we were talking about subcommittee, so you don't need the subcommittee to do anything to inform that. You'll cover that as part of REACH code.
Correct.
Okay, good. That was really the heart of it.
That's a presentation staff will bring to you all.
Okay, good. That makes
Great,
sense.
HPC.
Yeah, because I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not. I would love to eventually see that at city council, like, because I think that's an important debate and discussion, but something we should nudge the city to think about.
And the council on the 27th expressed interest in seeing.
Yeah. Good.
Good.
Anything else on the subcommittees? Did we flog that one too? So.
We did. And we
Yes, yeah.
made the motion, and we'll work offline on finding a new date that maybe aligns better with the amendment timeline anyway.
All right, I think home stretch, probably quick pieces. Why don't we move to reports and announcements, section E? And if it's okay, we can start with staff and staff updates.
Sure, I think I've already shared that the September 24th council meeting has the advisory body work plan. It also has the environmental justice element and safety element adoption, as well as an informational item on our home upgrade program, which launched on August 28th. And we have done one home assessment so far, but we have our list going of folks who are scheduled out for them. And so that's been a really fun process with PC, and we're all very excited about it. And we'll be officially launching in October. So moving away from kind of this wait list of 38 folks to broader community outreach and engagement. So stay tuned for that. And we'll probably be coming back to the commission asking for feedback on outreach approaches and materials. And then our Zelly program launched on Thursday last week. And we structure in that way so we could have Thursday and Friday to call Bellhaven residents specifically and invite them to access the program vouchers. And then on Monday, it opened to the broader community on our wait list. And we had 35 applications last time I checked yesterday. So that's exciting.
35 applications relative to what capacity?
It's 60. Yeah.
So we're halfway there.
Yeah, and
There's a breakdown between residents and businesses.
yeah. So I don't know if Liz is still on.
The businesses have to be headquartered in.
Still here. What was the
I don't know
question?
if you remember the breakdown of businesses versus residents for the vouchers. 24.
All I remember off the top of my head is 60. I think it's 5. I'll get back to you. Give me like 2 minutes and I'll do the math.
Thank you, Liz.
So my question is, do the businesses have to be headquartered in New Park? Or is it just for people who sort of?
They do have to be licensed in Menlo Park. And then we have some informational handouts about the ordinance that we can share tonight or at any other point we can print them out. And if folks do have concerns about their neighbors using gas leak blowers, they can report through C-Click Fix or Act Menlo Park. Or they can call the non-emergency police line or code enforcement. And right now we're in the phase of sending letters to scofflaws.
Scofflaws.
So.
Yeah,
We
but
were,
this is handy.
we were going out and it was creating a really challenging situation for our code enforcement officer as far as. Call load and just how she was received by folks. I'll leave it at that. So we moved to letters. Great.
Okay, why don't we move to Jennifer updates?
I had a couple. On September 28th, Saturday, we're hosting an event called Roots and Watts over in Half Moon Bay at the Heal Project, which is a farm out there, and it's going to be electrification and farm tour. It's family friendly. It's actually sold out right now, but there's a wait list. So if you're interested, you want to get on the wait list. It's really targeted towards elementary school kids and their parents or grandparents. So if you've got folks like that in your life and you want to do that, you can get on the wait list. And the other thing I want to highlight is the electric home tour, which is happening on October 19th. It looks like they might still be looking for homeowners, but if you're looking to take some next steps in terms of your home electrification, it's a good way to learn how other homeowners have done it.
What are the times on that tour?
I think it's 11 to 3.
Are you showcasing your home?
I am. Mhm. Come hang out.
I am too.
You are?
Oh, nice.
Oh, that would be, it would be exciting to maybe share too on social media that we have Menlo Park. I'll work with that too.
Yeah, good. Did I sent the thing to Liz, but did I send it to you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good.
Thank you.
I submitted it, so all good. Sorry I didn't respond. I got it from Genevieve too.
Awesome.
And it's 6 businesses and 60 residents.
Nice.
60.
For the bathroom.
That's, oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, yeah, sorry.
The home tour is like 60.
Great, any other updates? I've got 2 quick ones, both Saturday things, in case you're interested. Coastal Cleanup Day at San Francisco. Can never say that.
Francisco.
At San Francisco Creek, thank you. I can never say it. From 9 to 12. So if you want to put your children to work or sweat off some calories yourself, we did it last year, I think, as well. It's a bit of hard work, but very hands-on, kind of clean up the creek stuff. So
On which
that's
day?
one Saturday.
Oh, this Saturday.
This Saturday, 9 to 12, if you're interested. And then later in the day on Saturday, for all us tree folks, there is a tree awards for Canopy from 3 to 5 at Bloomhouse. So if you'd like to meet some folks at Canopy, talk about trees, they tend to have electeds there, volunteers. It's a nice little get together. It's at Bloomhouse, which is also a nice gathering space. So both those things are in East Palo Alto, just maybe 5 to 7 minutes inside the border between the park and East Palo Alto. Yeah, and if you are interested, I'm happy to send you details on. I think both of them are non-sign, well, I don't think you have to sign up for the Creek Day. I think you could just try out. Yeah. And I think the same thing with Canopy is, you can just. So let me know if you're interested and we'll send you details.
If people are still have energy to call the governor, there are a number of bills that are waiting for the governor to sign. So I guess there is the block decarbonization bill. There is like 7 that I track. The one about the schools and the solar.
Do you have a rundown of the different ones?
I can send you a picture, yeah, everything is waiting.
There's also, if you don't have enough substitutes, we can the electrification of Caltrain celebration.
Oh, that's right.
Yes. On Saturday, and then I think in San Mateo on Sunday, which will be. I
So
think-
Palo Alto?
Yeah, the Palo Alto one is gonna be a lot this year, so more stuff,
2 to 6.
yeah.
So what are they gonna do? They kind of have the train there and you can just walk in?
Yeah, a lot of tabling, a lot of people, a lot of just celebrating the electrification.
Free ride.
That's
this
the
week.
Yeah, and they're expecting like 5,000 people.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I was told, but so.
Is
yeah,
it?
it's gonna be a
That's
lot.
great.
I'll be there.
Exciting.
How can I share the list of the bills? Just send it to Sam and
Personally,
everybody?
as,
Or can I send them to you and then you send them to?
It's not city business, right?
yeah, it's not say business, just send it.
I'll
personally.
just send it.
Yeah, if you want to send it to everyone individually.
Thanks, Eduardo.
Thanks for those who did 1374. We were top of the list for the LA Times printing. If this is mystery, don't worry about it, but Josh asked that we promote it in the LA Times. So SB 1374, the school solar bill was #1 with the bullet
It was,
on that list. So hopefully, doesn't mean the governor reads the LA Times, but yeah, we're pushing things out. Thanks for doing that. I think
We can adjourn.
we can adjourn. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.